Well, I think it'd be great for us to begin. My name is Jeff Thies. I'm a clinical faculty for the College of Business Administration and director of the Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability. We are really excited to be hosting this afternoon's symposium on supply chain and sustainability, and really to bring industry experts, innovative business initiatives, and really an exciting panel, not just of participants and leaders, but also of students and business executives and professionals, all interested in this important topic. And as we begin, I'd like to start by introducing and welcoming our Dean, Dale Smith, Dean of the College of Business Administration, who will welcome us to our afternoon symposium.
Thanks, Jeff. On behalf of the College of Business Administration at LMU, it is my absolute delight to welcome everyone to our annual symposium put on every year by our Institute of Business Ethics and Sustainability, with support from a cast of thousands, it seems like. This year's program on supply chain and sustainability and its impact is something I know that we will all be excited about. It's an incredible learning opportunity for all of us, given the incredible panel of speakers that Jeff and his team have put together. And I'd like to thank Jeff and Sheree and a host of other faculty and staff members who contributed to the planning of this event, as well as thank our panelists. You know, today's symposium theme could not have come at a better time, given the challenges we face as a global business community recovering from a global pandemic. Shortages in materials, production, labor, transportation, all of these things weaken our supply chains. They create crises in economics and employment conditions and on the environment. While many organizations authentically share their commitments to lowering their carbon footprint or making progress on the Sustainable Development Goals and developing strategy around ESG, the questions we must ask and answer down the line of the supply chain are of paramount importance. You know, last year I was reading an article reporting on a study by two Penn State professors who asked the really critical question: how can we ensure that organizations are creating a cascade of sustainable practices that flow smoothly throughout the supply chain? I'd like to take a couple of minutes to talk about what some of those questions are and the things that we can engage in dialogue around today. Our mission here in the college at LMU, as many of you might know, is to advance knowledge and develop business leaders with moral courage and creative confidence to be a force for good in the global community. And the panelists you'll hear from today not only advance that knowledge, but they're doing it with the kind of integrity and the courage to say that our companies, our businesses, this landscape should have a voice at the table in addressing sustainability. And more importantly, they have the innate ability to innovate in products, in services, in ESG business practices that impact our supply chain. These experts you'll hear from today capture the business for good ideas and leaders, and they are leaders around the kinds of practices that lead to sustainable innovation in products and services. As the dean of a business school committed to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and applauding the firms that we'll hear from today who make this kind of impact, I still want us, all of us in the room today, to be asking the tough questions that we'll wrestle with in today's symposium. Questions such as, how might we ensure that sustainable practice addresses the entire network of the supply chain? Are we really knowledgeable about the lower tier suppliers and the capabilities that encourage sustainable business practice? Or are we as consumers and even educators contributing to the pressure that leads to shortcuts, short-term wins that have long-term consequences around our environment, our social goals, and our corporate responsibility? Do our different functional areas pursue similar agendas and priorities? And how do we align our goals and incentives for all functions in the business that interact with our suppliers? And finally, are we developing and disseminating industry-wide standards and training others to contribute to a commitment of doing the right thing and saving the planet for our future generations? We know from our work in CBA with the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative that the UN Global Impact is slowly getting organizations to join an international effort to promote corporate social responsibility. And our CBA, we partner with other universities around the world building a global class to talk about sustainable transformation. And our business companies are also leading in this space. Firms such as Microsoft, J&J, and Walmart are using a carbon disclosure project supply chain program, a global data collection platform in which suppliers disclose information about carbon emissions. And companies are using this kind of data to engage suppliers in being transparent about environmental impact. Our panelists this afternoon, I know, will be sharing some of their unique and innovative practices. But it's this kind of work, asking the right questions and designing new approaches and monitoring social and environmental targets within the company and with each supplier and vendor in a B2B chain that makes a difference. You know, there's an old adage that says something like fast, cheap, and good. And you can only have two of those at the same time. If you're fast and cheap, you're not going to be good. If you're cheap and good, you're not going to be fast, and so on. Now, when you take those three and add social and environmental goals, it makes that decision-making and the trade-offs even more challenging. Yet our planet's survival depends on attacking all five of those: cost, quality, delivery, and the social environmental goals in an integrated and collaborative way. We have to demand a triple bottom line perspective for our businesses across the supply chain. We know that our health depends on ethical sourcing across all sectors and a commitment to knowing the full story about a product or a service that is offered to a consumer. Many will say that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Are we willing to accept responsibility to lead and strengthen all the links in that chain, be proactive in mitigating risks, and collaborating in such a way that leads to a sustainable, better global community? I'm certainly counting on it, and I look forward to our engagement this afternoon from this business for good perspective. Thank you. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you so very much, Dean Smith, and thank you for being with us this afternoon as we really just have this wonderful and engaging symposium for all the reasons that you just described. Just a couple of notes about logistics and planning. The symposium begins with a case study, and then we have two panels of executive experts discussing the dynamics related to supply chain and sustainability, building upon that important and initial case study from Grove Collaborative. And then we will end with another case study from Williams-Sonoma. In each of the presentations, there will be an opportunity for some question and answer, and you'll be invited to offer your questions through the chat function on Zoom. One thing for our non-student attendees is that we have a program called CBA Advantage, which is a program of student opportunity and engagement that invites students to participate in an array of co-curricular activities like this, and through that process, build an electronic portfolio, not just of what they've learned, but the projects that they've engaged in and how they've contributed to the work of these various initiatives. So that means that after every one of our sessions, there will be a QR code that appears on the screen so that students can log that in for their CBA Advantage recognition. The other thing is that students are also gathering in Hilton 100, and there's an opportunity for a live viewing event of this afternoon as well. And there I would like to thank Professor Jason DeMillo, the Associate Professor of Management and Entrepreneurship, who is hosting that event as well. Finally, I'd like to thank all of the panelists and presenters who are joining us this afternoon. In addition to their business leadership, they profoundly support Loyola Marymount, the Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability, the Kiesner Center for Entrepreneurship, and the assorted academic and curricular programs and co-curricular programs that we offer to make sure that our programs are really anchored in and connected with leading business practice. And so with that, and also I will just say that we will take a brief break between our second session and our third session, and more on that when we get to that point in the program. So if we could now turn to our first presentation, it is my great pleasure to welcome and introduce Jon Silverman, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Physical Products for Grove Collaborative, Danielle Jezienicki, Director, Sustainability, Grove Collaborative, and Alex Crane, Director of Innovation, Grove Collaborative. Their inspiring work which we will see and learn from, will really set the frame for how we will engage both our conversation and our insights. And so thank you so much. Before I share the screen so that I can present your presentation, maybe if I could ask each of you, Jon, Danielle, and Alex, just a brief introduction of yourself and your background and what brings you to this work.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. Really proud to be here and excited to interact with all of you over the next few hours. My name is Jon Silverman. I've been at Grove Collaborative about 5 years, and I head up the majority of our physical product work. I've been in the physical product space for a long time. I started out in food and then moved to homewares, housewares, home furnishings, et cetera. I was actually at Williams-Sonoma for a number of years. I know you'll be hearing from some of those folks later today. And was excited to join Grove about 5 years ago. I had a young child and had another one on the way, and thought, how do I make sure that I'm having more of a positive impact with the work that I do, and have always felt great about what Grove does every day, because while we don't always hit our goals, and some things work, some don't, we really do, I think, have the right things in mind, things that Alex and Danielle paths they have put us on, and it's fun to walk those roads and figure out how we can bring consumers along with us.
Thank you, Jon. Danielle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Jezienicki. I'm the Director of Sustainability at Grove. I've been with Grove just about 2 years now, and I actually came from Williams-Sonoma, so I worked very closely with Jennifer, who you'll hear from later. But very excited to be at Grove, deepen my, kind of working my passion for making the home a sustainable ecosystem where consumers can really live their values. And so you'll be hearing about our Beyond Plastic Road. So I work really closely on our plastic program as well as our other sustainability initiatives. So thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Crane. I'm the Director of Innovation for Home Care at Grove. I've been at Grove for 6.5 years. Before that, I worked in the art world, and I think I was really looking for something that was more mission-driven. Art world is super interesting, but definitely left me craving something that actually, gave back and did something good for the planet. I've always loved natural products. And when I found out that it could be a job to just be focused on making them, I was like, wow, this is incredible. I just get to do this all the time. So I love being at Grove, and I think I'm really excited to be here today and talk more about, the challenges, but also the really exciting progress we've made in moving towards plastic-free products.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so very much. It's great to have you with us. And so now let me share screen, and we'll bring up your materials and really look forward to what you'll be sharing with us.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to get us started here, and I think the first thing we're actually going to show you all is just about a 1.5-minute video, just kind of gives you a little bit of a background as to Grove and our mission.
We see the world our industry has helped create. We see the plastic crisis. We see ocean pollution and deforestation. We see it, and we're here to change it. We're Grove Collaborative. We exist to transform the products you use at home into a force for good. To create a world where all choices are sustainable choices. Because we believe that how we wipe up life's small messes, what we use to soothe our bodies, how we clean our homes, and what we teach our kids have the power to create a brighter, more sustainable world. Today, every product at Grove is plastic neutral. Every shipment is carbon neutral. And by 2025, Grove will be 100% plastic free. Because sustainability is the only future. And what we do now matters.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. So that's a new video for us at Grove. We do call it our anthem video because it represents so much of who we are and what we're trying to do. Hope it gave you a broad sense as to as to kind of what we stand for. We have been an e-commerce provider for about 8 years. People came to Grove when they wanted sustainable home and personal care products. We have a soft subscription model, which means you usually get recurring shipments. But as we evolve who we are, we now sell in retail. We now have some of our customers on a subscription model, and some are just buying in one-off purchases. We're the leading sustainable company transforming the products you use at home. We feel like consumer products can be a force for human and environmental good. And we're a growing group of people that all share this common mission of being able to do something good for the world when it comes to these product types. You can go to the next slide. Just a couple high-level things about our mission and our vision. Right? I mean, we no longer should have, sustainability can't be an or, it has to be an and. We all have to make choices, but it can't be what am I sacrificing to make a choice that's better. It's what am I doing in addition to. And we feel like the future is clear for us in our ability to do that. And we can transform consumer products industry into a force for human environmental good. And so as we started to formulate, and this just gives you a view of, Grove is a curator and a creator. On the right side, you'll see that some of the brands that we've worked with for years, who always had a great history in creating natural products, the ingredients that were in the bottles were the right ingredients. We have taken a lot of their learnings and used that as a jumping off point for the brands that you see on the left, which are our brands that we've created from scratch. Grove Co., Seedling, Honu, et cetera. What we found with great brands and pioneers like Seventh Generation and Method, et cetera, was they were still thinking through mostly, brick and mortar lens, and being a digital first company opened up some new doors to us. We could think about concentration at different form factors, like our leading concentrate you see in some of those videos. We didn't have to think about taking up more physical space on shelf. And so that meant things could be smaller, and smaller means less water, less plastic, less packaging, less carbon to transport these things. And that really opened up a whole host of new opportunities for us. So we continue to live in both of these worlds. We are a curator of great home and personal care brands, got into the pet space, got into the garden space, and we are creator of what we think are brands that best reflect the vision that we have for the future in these product categories. Just kind of, I won't read this for you. You can tell my voice is a little bit hoarse today. But there's a lot of, we feel like we are leading by example. Again, sustainability is the only future. And if you go to the next slide, so when we think about our business, and this is a lot of the work that Danielle has led for us, we have impact in a few key areas: carbon, forests, kind of advocacy, and plastic. And when we took a step back and thought about where is it that we can have the most impact, where can we differentiate? We are trying to grow a business. Where can we stand out? And where is our industry kind of sinned for quite a long time to date? We really felt that was plastic. We are carbon neutral. We're doing a lot of great things there. We're not kind of in a company of one in being carbon neutral. A lot of people are doing great work there. But beyond plastic was our audacious goal to do something that kind of no one had done before. There was 2 phases. January 1 of 2020, we decided that we were going to become plastic neutral. For every ounce of plastic that we ship to our customers for all products, we're going to work with a couple of partners to collect the same amount of ocean-bound plastic in places that really needed to be collected, in South America and Southeast Asia, where they're seeing harm from this. In phase 2, by the end of 2025, we will have no plastic in our product, in our packaging, in anything that ships out to customers. Why into 2025? Because it's a really hard thing to do. We're not exactly sure how to do all of it with every piece of plastic that we ship, but we are working really hard to do it. And we didn't know how audacious our goal should be. How do we know this is the right one? Because we have a lot of internal conversation about it. Like, oh my gosh, what happens if we don't get there? And how hard can we push our third-party partners to get there, et cetera? That means it's the right thing because it's hard to do. If it was easy, we would have made it a goal in 2021, or hundreds of people would be doing it. And this slide and the next one just kind of show the consumption of plastic, where that plastic usage comes from, and why it's such a pervasive problem and getting worse. And it's really no secret. I think that there's a stat, more people, if you go to the next slide, I think more people, this is some things a little bit specific to Grove, but more people agree that plastic is a problem than agree that climate change is a problem. So if you can go after something that most people identify as a thing, then you've got fertile ground to work on, and we think we do. So I think the last thing I'm sharing, I think, is one more video. It's a short one. This is a video that we currently run on a lot of platforms to just get new customers, this specifically get new customers to come to Grove based on the problem with plastic. Let's see this.
U.S. companies make 76 million pounds of plastic packaging every day. At Grove, we think it's time for plastic to pack it up. Our products are sustainably powerful and help solve the single-use plastic crisis. By 2025, Grove will be 100% plastic-free. Get a free starter set and free shipping at grove.com. What you say?
So I will turn it over to Alex here. Thank you again so much for the time. For anybody who's not a Grove customer, for the few of you who are not yet Grove customers, I know you're at grove.com now signing up, but thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the Q&A a little bit later. Over to Alex.
Hi, great. So if you want to go to the next slide. So I just want to talk a little bit about our product development approach. Obviously, you know, we've always been sustainably minded since day one, but I think when we set this goal to move beyond plastic by 2025, it was both like exciting and sort of terrifying for the innovation team. And we had to figure out how we're going to make this real. And I think, you know, we really want to lead the industry because plastic is obviously still so ubiquitous. So in terms of how we began, we looked at our assortment and obviously identified where we're using plastic. First and foremost, we thought about the highest volume items. I think you can't do everything at once. And I think Grove very much embraces an ethos of continuous improvement, where, you know, if you can actually, or we can go here. Either way, I can just speak to both with some visuals. But I think either is fine. But I think we embrace an ethos of continuous improvement. So I think it's like, you know, you kind of have to take steps and always be getting better. So first and foremost, we're like, okay, where does it really count? We obviously identified, which you'll see on the next slide, our concentrates and our hand and dish soaps were definitely the place to begin because those are some of our best selling products. And, you know, previously were in plastic containers. There's the exploratory phase, which is where we really begin things. And I think that's one where you're allowed to kind of be more expansive in your view. And we're thinking about, you know, should we be replacing hand soap with a new format, like a liquid hand soap with a new format entirely? Or as we landed on, should hand soap end up in an aluminum bottle? So I think this is a time to really just see what's out there, new forms, new packaging, we looked at all different kinds of materials for packaging, aluminum, paper, you know, did some brief research on things like that came from mushrooms, like mycelium, like really just being more kind of expansive. And then once we had done that work, we really refined our approach and got into this definition phase, which is more about how we're going to make this real. We kind of know the general landscape now. The way that we think about really all the brands that we build at Grove is in terms of this kind of trifecta. You've got the consumer, performance, and sustainability. And our view is that you should be able to serve all those things. There really shouldn't be a compromise. We need to make products that are consumer first, that perform, and that obviously meet our sustainability standards. Performance is a huge barrier to people continuing to purchase sustainable products. And I think that that's why we really hold ourselves to an incredibly high standard, because we can offer you these, you know, new great home care products that are plastic free, but if they don't deliver on performance, you're not going to repurchase them. So then in that definition phase, we're kind of like figuring out how do we serve, you know, as I said, like the consumer, performance, sustainability. So what we're doing is we're getting some consumer insights on preliminary concepts. We're vetting the kind of sustainability of both the formula of the product and then also the package. We're also going to start working with some third-party labs, and that's what we did, and kind of what we continue to do is we evolve towards being entirely plastic free to vet the performance of new forms. You know, if we're looking at a tablet instead of a liquid for our cleaning concentrates, we need to make sure that we're still getting the performance that we desire. And ultimately, you know, we found that we didn't. So after we've kind of gone through this phase, we then move into product development. And by that time, you know, we have a clear sense of where we want to go. So, you know, for example, for the concentrates, we had decided to move into plastic bottles with, or rather, sorry, bad slip, glass bottles with an aluminum tap, not plastic bottles. And I think what we had to do then in the develop phase is you're really testing and validating it. You're making sure that it works from a manufacturing perspective, that the process can be scalable, with, you know, putting soaps in aluminum containers, that you're not getting any weird interaction. So really just making sure that this is something that can go to market and really grow at scale, because ultimately, you know, we want to be in homes across America, we already are, but in everybody's home, replacing their conventional products with a better plastic-free alternative. And then ultimately, we launched the product. And I think that's when, you know, we really start to stay, or we make sure to stay in close dialogue with our consumers, because I think, you know, even if we've gotten insights up front, once this is out in the world, it's really important to read reviews, hear what people are saying, and ensure that we really are developing products that are consumer first. I think, you know, it's difficult when you're trying to innovate. You can have a lot of cool ideas, but you can't create a routine for the consumer that is more cumbersome or just complicated. So it's really important that once we've got these products out, that we're reading reviews, we're still talking to consumers, and we're thinking about how we can continue to refine their experience. In terms of challenges, there are definitely many. I think that doing this kind of product development is not easy. And I can see why a lot of people find it daunting, but Grove is very much kind of committed to paving the way for others in some of our explorations that, you know, have many twists and turns. So I think cost, that's definitely a reality for us. Plastic is ubiquitous and it's cheap, and new materials are expensive and just less commonly used, which I think ties into the range of options. You know, when we went to go look for aluminum bottles, if you want a plastic package, you can get so many options just off the shelf, sizes, shapes, finishes. You go to get aluminum and the selection's a lot slimmer. So it's kind of like, how do we find things that are right for our product and that also, you know, are still good for the consumer to use? We don't want to give you an aluminum bottle that's so wide that when you go to refill your hand soap, you're like needing two hands, which seems like a small thing, but actually was really challenging, given that, you know, the people that are working with these materials just don't yet operate at the scale that a lot of the people working in plastics do. I think the other thing is there are some things for which there are not solutions currently. So, you know, a lot of things around closures and sprayers, you know, we are definitely focused on those now, but there really aren't a lot of great solutions for like a trigger on a spray bottle. The inner mechanisms are all plastic. So I think that's really challenging as well. And then I think supply chain is already complicated right now, but, you know, again, when you're working with materials that aren't as widely used and suppliers that maybe are trying out new things for you, you're a lot more vulnerable. So we definitely have times when, you know, I guess like things are delayed, or a coating that we're using on a bottle because it's like very unique to us is like in short supply. It's a lot more difficult to feel like you can have certainty in your supply chain, but we're definitely building that. And I think the other thing is performance, which I alluded to briefly before, but as you consider new formats for products, it's, you know, it's challenging to always capture the performance you might get in the conventional format. So a large, you know, jug of liquid laundry versus trying to make it super concentrated, or, you know, as I said, like moving from like a liquid to a tab. We ultimately haven't gone to tabs just because of a lot of the performance challenges. But I think overall, our hope is that we can, as I said, pave the way for others, that we've had a lot of these challenges, but hopefully, you know, Grove continues to grow and our buying power increases, and we enable other people to be able to make choices that are plastic free and better for the planet. So it's definitely been a long winding road, but a really exciting one and rewarding one to see all these products come to fruition. I'll turn it over to Danielle now.
Thanks, Alex. If you can switch to the next slide, please.
Great. So just backing up for a second, I thought I'd start by just speaking a little bit about why it is that we're focused on plastic. And I know John alluded to this, but I think, you know, in terms of a takeaway for other companies or looking at, you know, or speaking to just cognizant that this is a group of people who might be working at companies, you know, kind of other than outside of our industry. The reason we're so focused on plastic is that our industry has really been built on the back of single-use plastic and is very much relying on this, you know, continued concept of single-use plastic for its growth. So we felt like there was a unique opportunity, as John spoke about a little bit, to change our industry. And most importantly, to showcase that a plastic-free future was possible. This is the most material negative impact we have as a business. You know, so we obviously have a carbon footprint, but we don't have an outsized carbon footprint, you know, especially compared to others. So this is really the area where we had the most material impact. And so I offer that as advice, you know, as you get into the sustainability world or, you know, kind of any role, really. I think this concept of materiality is a really important one, to always ground your sustainability program and your impact focus on the areas where you have an impact, whether positive or negative. This is a screenshot from our sustainability report, which is meant to be very readable and digestible. So feel free to head over to grove.co/sustainability and you can read the report and see the slide. Next slide, please. So I laid out, how do you reach an impossible goal? So we're not totally sure, but this is how we set out to do this. So step number one is to measure. So when we started this program, I don't think, to be totally candid with you all, I don't think we knew that it was going to be complicated. I don't think we knew how complicated. And so the first step was measurement. We kind of like had the sense that plastic was everywhere, but did we know our plastic footprint? No, you know, we kind of really just, and I think this speaks uniquely to Grove in that most companies are not going to be values aligned enough to set such an ambitious goal without totally, you know, kind of wrapping their arms around it first. So the first thing we did, which was, you know, super important to us, because I think any, you know, credibility is going to rely on really robust measurement, our ability to, you know, kind of speak with real certainty about our plastic footprint and understand as we measure plastic and not only know our total footprint, but how does plastic show up in our assortment? And what are the different ways where we can start to pull the levers to bring that down? So we look at a bunch of different metrics, which we publish in our plastic scorecard, and I'll talk about that in a few slides, but we started on a really rigorous measurement program. So measuring both the products that we create at Grove and also working with our third-party brands to measure all of the plastic that they're using in their assortment. And this meant, you know, really going back and forth with brands being like, okay, no, we need, you know, primary packaging, secondary packaging, like really getting into the weeds with brands so that we could get an accurate plastic footprint and understand, you know, what the roadmap needed to look like based on our current assortment. So if you move on to the next slide. So this gives you a sense of like, we looked brand by brand. You have to look at, you know, kind of different dimensions. So I think Grove Co is a good example. There's a lot of durable products in there. That is, you know, when you look at Grove Co's assortment, you're going to think like this number is kind of low, but it's just based on the different types of products. So every brand looks really different and has completely different limitations. So Honu, for example, is our vitamin and supplements business and powders. So that has glass bottles with plastic caps. So transitioning to plastic free, there is a much more straightforward path. You basically just replace the cap and you're done. Super Bloom is our skincare line in cosmetics and personal care and skincare in particular. So you can replace the main vessel, but as Alex mentioned, closures are something that's really difficult to move out of plastic for. So we're stuck with, you know, a really small % of plastic in the form of closures that there truly aren't alternatives to move out of. So the challenges were really different for each brand. So that measurement really lets us set a roadmap that's unique and specific to each brand and to each category, understanding the unique challenges and even the shared challenges kind of based on that footprint. So next step, please. Next slide, please. So the next step, we talked about a little bit about mitigating. So our announcement around becoming plastic free started off, you know, it came hand in hand with our announcement in 2020 that we were going to be 100% plastic neutral. And John spoke about that a little bit, but so what this looks like is that we partner with two organizations, Repurpose Global and Plastic Bank. So once we had measured our plastic accurately, sorry, I heard an echo, but hopefully you're not hearing it. We collect 1 ounce of plastic for every ounce of plastic that we ship to customers. So we work with the two partners I mentioned in 4 different countries now, or 5 different countries. I think we're up to 5 to collect plastic, largely ocean bound, also, you know, just generally kind of polluting plastic and building out infrastructure for plastic collection. So really having a large environmental and social impact just through our commitment to mitigate our negative impact. And so I think the takeaway, kind of thinking about other industries, is that we know we're not perfect. We have this big goal. It doesn't mean we can't do something in the meantime. And plastic neutral isn't the end all be all. It's not our ultimate solution of how we're going to address the plastic crisis, but it certainly acknowledges the challenges that we have today and allows us to make a positive impact. So really an important first step for us. And we're proud to be the world's first plastic neutral certified retailer, across our brands. And we actually rolled this out to third-party brands and asked them to participate in their plastic footprint. This is a big part of being a brand on the Grove platform. We send you your plastic footprint quarterly. We ask you to cover the cost of your plastic neutral. And so essentially what this does is it creates an internal extended producer responsibility, or EPR, so that brands are aware of their plastic footprint and ultimately incentivized to move away from plastic, because we're charging them for every ounce of plastic that they sell. I mean, we're not keeping that money, we're passing it on for plastic collection. But still, it creates, I think, a real awareness of your plastic footprint, and just an important way to mitigate our impact in the time being. So next slide, please. So this is getting into the weeds. So this will look different for everyone, but we felt very strongly that we were not just going to tell our brands, okay, see you in 5 years, like good luck getting to plastic free. These industry challenges are really shared ones, and we realized that as a brand, or even a family of Grove brands, we're not going to solve this problem on our own. We don't know how we're going to get there, but certainly the path is going to be smoother if we partner with our brands. So we've set up a working group of all of our third-party brands that kind of open to all of our third-party brands. We've had phenomenal participation and engagement, and we work really closely with our brands to offer them different solutions, and even just to open up a dialogue, a transparent conversation around what are the shared challenges and how can we support each other on this path. And so I've made great progress there. But I think this is a really important part of our program, and that it really lends credibility to it. Like, I hear from brands constantly, like, I really can't believe that you guys are working so closely and really supporting us on this journey to get there, to get to plastic free, and to kind of acknowledge the challenges. So I think on Grove's behalf, this is an important part of, kind of establishing that credibility and saying, yeah, we know this is difficult. Like, our goal is really to change the industry. Our goal isn't for Grove to be plastic free because we kicked a bunch of brands off the website and then we were able to market, we're 100% plastic free. Our goal really truly is to work with our industry to change it and move things forward. So next slide, please. So Alex mentioned a roadmap. And so I think also an important part of this was kind of, it becomes overwhelming. If you think about a challenge like moving towards plastic free, there's so much you need to do. There's so much unknown. And so I think putting together this framework was really helpful in terms of understanding the phases of work and also acknowledging what's not going to happen today. So for example, there are parts of our business, the focus on single-use plastic and replacements, that's the first area of focus. And so how do you separate something like that from, Alex mentioned, like the plastic sprayer? We know that we have no replacement for a plastic sprayer right now. So how do we start to, rather than kind of trying to chase down every single thing on day one, how do we put together a plan where we can be strategic, be focused on, the lowest hanging fruit, the highest percent of plastic that we can remove, and, kind of work our way up to chase down those last few percents. So I think a roadmap in this case is a really good example of something that's helpful in terms of where we need innovation, where is long-term work needed versus short-term work needed. So this helps you kind of lay out your plan and also involve cross-functional partners, set, interim goals, measure progress, and really kind of set, a path towards engagement rather than just starting to chase down and run in every direction around plastic reduction. So I think an important part of any corporate goal and sustainability. Next slide. So innovation, Alex talked a little bit about this. I wanted to also highlight our plastic-free hair care and skincare brand called Peach Not Plastic. And this speaks to, my favorite thing about this brand is what Jon mentioned about there being no trade-offs. So sustainability has for so long been a proposition of trade-offs. Like, you can either have the product that you want, or you can be sustainable and kind of sacrifice some element, whether it's convenience or price. That's how you get the sustainable product. And Peach is really the first product that, I've seen to market at scale, or that we've launched at Grove, where it started off as a plastic-free brand. The whole proposition is to make plastic-free fun and accessible. You're saving plastic. It's actually more affordable if you consider the per bottle price of shampoo. So a really kind of unique proposition where sustainability was not a trade-off, but rather a fun attribute of this product. And so I think an important way to showcase to brands and to customers that plastic-free is for them. It's not this niche thing that's only for people kind of committed to using baking soda for deodorant. It's really for everybody. So that's, just a fun case study that's detailed in our sustainability report at greater length. I know we're running short on time, so I'll just go really quickly through the last three slides. If you can go to the next one, please. So communication, we felt really strongly that transparency is critical here. So we published the first of its kind scorecard. This details our plastic footprint and all the different metrics by which we measure our progress. We publish this on a biannual basis with our plastic footprint, and encourage others to do so. And you can go to the next slide. And then this is, kind of a question I leave you with is like, what does it mean to be a sustainable company? I think we kind of point to different companies for different things, but at Grove, we're kind of always asking ourselves this question. We're chasing down plastic because it's the most material to us. We're also focused on our other areas of impact, but the really kind of driving question is how can home products be, that question shown in the beginning of how can home products be a force for positive impact? And so that's really what drives us. So plastic is, our highest priority. And I think a really high integrity expression of how we're setting about, the path to get there to plastic free. So I know we have a couple minutes left for questions, but I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Really appreciate it. And yes, a reminder, please use the chat function if you have any questions. And I can start with one that's already been posted from a student. And that is, what is your thinking about recycled plastics and about that as a viable dimension of a plastic strategy? They ask questions about the technology, both of recycling plastics and then our recycling infrastructure being able to deliver or dimensions of that question.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So recycled plastic is an interim goal for us. Our focus, as we mentioned, is plastic free. We think recycled plastic is great. It's just not what we're chasing down, but we definitely encourage brands, and we actually require brands to use recycled plastic for any products that are still in plastic as of next year. So we do, kind of require that brands move in that direction. There's no question the state of recycling infrastructure in the US is not good. And whether or not even, aluminum gets recycled, although that's very likely to be recycled compared to plastic, but, there's a hierarchy of materials that get recycled. So certainly our intention is to move up that hierarchy and use materials that are more likely to get recycled by more households in the US. Plastic is really lower, and people really don't have any understanding that so little plastics are recycled. So that's an important part of our work on the advocacy side. So we participate in conversations and, advocacy efforts to encourage, better recycling infrastructure in the US. I think, honestly, if we had really robust recycling infrastructure in the US, it wouldn't solve all our problems around plastic, but certainly it would, it would be a different conversation. I think if, let's say 75% of plastics were truly recycled, kept in circulation, it would really be a different thing. But the reality is that 9% of plastics are getting recycled. So ultimately, we're creating this massive problem at end of life, just, by focusing on convenience.
Thank you so very much. You've referenced the use of aluminum a number of times. Could you speak about your analysis of aluminum as a recyclable product or a viable packaging?
I mean, aluminum is infinitely recyclable. I'll let Alex speak to, formulation, but it's infinitely recyclable, more likely to get recycled by more households. It does have a higher carbon footprint, but we are committed to net zero carbon by 2030. So we're very cognizant to not trade off plastic for carbon. And ultimately, our goal isn't to move from plastic into glass and aluminum. It's to move from plastic into reusable, refillable, kind of materials that are not single use in some. So I don't know if Alex or John want to add anything.
Yeah, I think for aluminum, it seemed like the best near term solution when we surveyed what was possible right now. I think, it is readily recyclable. The aluminum we use does contain recycled content. And I think when you talk about, I think I saw some question around circularity. I think getting into aluminum is a good way to embrace circularity to some degree. I think the other piece for us is that, we were able to crack aluminum sooner rather than later. And I think, as I spoke to, it's about continuous improvement. I mean, my whole world is focused on kind of what does now look like? What about the future? And I think aluminum for now gives the consumer the best experience, allows us to, recycle, people can readily recycle it, and can house our product safely. I think that's the other piece that's complicated that you don't usually think about when you use products, that it's actually not that easy. You can't just put anything in any container and then expect it to have a good shelf life and be safe for the consumer. So I think when we did our analysis, it was the best near-term option for us. And then I think we're really thinking about what happens after that. So it's definitely on our minds.
Thank you. One question was asked about how you experience the plastic industry. Is there pushback from the plastic industry? How do you experience your not just your business, but your message related to the plastic industry, the petroleum industry, supporting the plastic industry, those dimensions?
I mean, thankfully, we haven't heard from them directly. I think we're, a little too small to be on their radar, but certainly we've heard from third-party brands saying like, why are you doing this? Plastic is a great material. And I think our answer is like, this is our focus. This is our way to change the industry. And this is the innovation that we think needs to happen. And this is our version of sustainability. I think we're aware that there is no such thing as a perfect solution, but yeah, I mean, I think like sustainability has a lot of trade-offs. I think this is our most kind of industry-wide systemic change, like our vision of what the future needs to look like and what sustainable home care looks like. I think you also kind of have to know on when, like, we don't need to convince everybody. We just need to do what we're doing. It kind of comes down to this gets really tricky really fast. I don't know if John, you have some.
Also, it's a great question. And I think for us, it is, where are we going to be in 20 or 30 and 50 years as a world, as a society, as an ecosystem? And if you could get to the heart of it, of that question, with some people that work for and advocate on behalf of plastic, I think a lot of those people would say plastic cannot be a significant part of that future. We do not have the infrastructure to collect it and recycle it. And to be honest, I don't really think anyone is trying to build that infrastructure at massive scale. Chemical recycling, I think, is less of a thing today than it was 3 years ago, breaking polymers back up into monomers. There just isn't anyone who is going to do it. So, at some point you have to take your kind of, I'm a little bit old, but your early 1990s Honda Accord that you've been like plowing money into to like get it to kind of keep running for another 3 months and another 3 months, and just say, you know what, I'm going to pull back and I'm going to go further into debt, so to speak, not literally, and buy the new car that is a hybrid. That's my Prius that leads me to my other thing. You just have to reinvent the wheel at some point. I don't think trying to improve upon we are working on iterative improvements, as Alex mentioned, but they start from a sound place. Aluminum is being recycled. We don't need to wish cycle it. It is being recycled at much, much higher rates. You can make changes in the plastic world. You're just not going to be there. Play it out for 50 years and and it gets better and better, but maybe at a rate that's greater than we actually think it's going to. We're still drowning in plastic. So we have to think about it differently. And we're not going to agree with everybody on it, and that's fine. We're going to think about and present a future to consumers that allows them to shift paths as opposed to trying to optimize the path that they're on.
I think one other thing is all of these companies know that, like, it's not because Grove is doing this that, consumers are moving away from plastic. Boardrooms across the Fortune 500 list of companies who are heavy in their use of plastic know that the consumer tide is turning, so I think there's a real sea change in the way that consumers perceive this, that brands, that is really raising the alarm bells. So that's kind of an interesting trend that we're lucky to be, not lucky, but like purposefully at the forefront of.
Thank you so very much. Just if I could ask one final question to wrap up. You're a B corporation. Could you just briefly describe that for those who may not be familiar with that?
Sure. So a B corporation is a benefit corporation. So there's two things. There's a PBC and then a certified B corporation. So certified B corporation means you have gone through the survey with a group called B Labs that has verified, it's a very robust survey that focuses on all of your impact through, community, environment, stakeholders, and social impact, and evaluates all your different practices. And ultimately, it is businesses that are, evaluating their impact. And sorry, B Lab is not going to be happy with my explanation. Basically, you're putting social and environmental impact alongside financial impact. So you're not prioritizing financial returns over social and environmental impact. And there's a very rigorous process that validates that. And so we're very proud to be a part of a small and growing group of companies that, value business as a force for good. And that's ultimately what the B Corp community is about.
I'll just add to that, sorry, we are also a public benefit corporation, as Danielle referenced. That is actually Not a lot of companies our size are public benefit corporations. It's different. You have to go and change your charter. It is the type of how you incorporate yourself. That is one that also basically says that we have a fiduciary responsibility to think about social and environmental in addition to maximizing value for shareholders. And that's one that we're proud of it because we have to go to our board, to our investors, some of whom are just looking for return and saying, we are going to change how we think about how we measure our initiatives and how we measure our success.
Thank you. It's both a legal structure of incorporation and a certification process in those areas that you described, Danielle. Yeah.
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so very much for explaining that. Just thank you very much for your presentation. We may have time to circle back for more question and answers later in our symposium. I was struck by a word you used, John, which is audacious, and reminded, I'm a former healthcare executive, and we used to speak about big, hairy, audacious goals and these BHAGs and those stretch aspirations. And part of it was the desire to kind of move our organization forward, but it was also really engaging that area of responsibility. In the health system I was with, one of our goals was perfect care because we couldn't imagine a world in which we would promise less than perfect care. But that's an incredibly audacious goal. So then you get into all of the specifics about how do you get there. And that's a bit of what you painted, both in terms of vision and then all of the concrete work to get there. Thank you so very much, really appreciate it. And if we could please invite the QR code for our students. Thank you very much for our CBA Advantage. Really, really appreciate it. Okay, we'll hold this up here for about another 30 seconds or so. And then if we could invite our next panel. This is Donna Osiri, Chief Procurement Officer, Sony Pictures Worldwide, and Chair of the Green Business Council for Southern California. Danielle will continue to participate in this panel. Thank you so much, Danielle. John Marler, Director, Global ESG, Ingram Micro, and Dominique Hargreaves, Director, Sustainability and Corporate Social Responsibility, American Realty Advisors. Let's just take a moment to invite them up to our screen. And then also to pin John Marler, please. Wonderful. Thank you so very much. So again, Danielle, great appreciation and welcome, Donna, John, and Dominique. And what we'd like to do is continue our conversation really about sustainability and supply chain. We began with this one very impressive and inspirational example from Grove Collaborative. But really what we'd like to do now is invite your experiences in your industries and in your professional experiences related to these topics. And I wonder if we can just start, if I could invite you to introduce yourself and your experience in the area of procurement and sustainability leadership. And maybe Donna, if we could begin with you.
Sure, thank you, Jeff. Happy to kick it off. Can everyone hear me all right? All right, thank you very much. Always making sure we don't have technical difficulties, but I am Donna Osiri. I'm the new Chief Procurement Officer for Sony Pictures Entertainment. I've been in this role for 4 months. And I'm so proud to lead our global teams in support of procurement, sourcing, travel, and alliances. In my 25-year career, I've made it my mission to include social responsibility and diversity in our day-to-day operations for all the companies I've supported. So if you're not familiar with Sony Pictures, we make movies like Spider-Man No Way Home, Ghostbusters Afterlife, and in theaters now, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, TV shows like Outlander, Jeopardy, and one I'm really excited about that's coming soon, Wheel of Time. So that's kind of us and what we do at Sony Pictures. But prior to that, I've spent time at Viacom CBS, NBC Universal, and before all the fun stuff, I was at Bank of America and Earthlink and other companies. And again, whether it was at a bank or a technology company or a media content creator, sustainability programs have the power to facilitate change in the most impactful way, right? With purchasing power. In addition to being part of things like the White House initiative on Women's Global Development and Prosperity and the White House Initiative on Asian American and Pacific Islanders. I currently serve as the chairwoman for the Green Business Council of Southern California, whose mission it is to inspire the business community to deliver a better social, economic, and environmental future by sharing best practices. I mean, that's what we're here to do. That's actually how I met one of my fellow panelists, John Marler here. And, you know, I think I've met a few of you as well, Dominic. And I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, Danielle, but looking forward to, you know, having, you know, meeting each other in some of these circles. But really, I'm very excited to be here today to speak with all of you and looking forward to some inspiring thoughts and discussions.
Thank you so much. John.
Hi, everyone. John Marler, Director of Global ESG at Ingram Micro. We are a large technology distributor based in Irvine, California, probably the biggest company that you've never heard of. However, if you own a technology device like a laptop or a smartphone or something like that, the chances are very high that we have touched it at some point in its journey from the manufacturing to the end retailer. It's a $49.1 billion company based on revenues. And so I just joined, Donna, I beat you. I've only been with Ingram for 3 months. I joined Ingram from AEG, based in downtown Los Angeles, and active in the live sports and musical entertainment. And basically just looking forward to this new opportunity, moving from, you know, very much a consumer brand to a supply chain operation, and, you know, looking to work with both of our upstream partners and downstream partners to advance the cause of, you know, environmental sustainability, but also other ESG principles, which are very important in the technology industry.
Thank you so much, John. And Dominique.
Yeah, great to be here with all of you. I'm really looking forward to the panel. My name is Dominique, and I am a proud LMU Lion. Graduated with a degree in business administration, and it has served me very well throughout my career. I have had a love of real estate since my days at LMU, and actually before then. That led me to a variety of leadership roles with new construction residential developers, the U.S. Green Building Council in Los Angeles, stint for the last 3 years with Mayor Garcetti as his Deputy Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of LA. And I am also recently initiated in my new role as the Director of Sustainability and Corporate Social Responsibility at American Realty Advisors. So I'm excited to speak with you all about supply chain, especially in terms of construction materials and the result of supply chain inefficiencies on costs and the real estate industry at large. And I'll just tie it back to Donna and say, while I was at LMU, my first internship was at Sony Pictures working on Spider-Man. So all these things come full circle. So thanks for having me. Excited for the panel.
That's complete serendipity. That wasn't by design. That's really great. So thank you for sharing that, Dominique. So for our conversation, I'd like to ask each of you a couple of questions. And Danielle, you've introduced yourself, and thank you so much for participating in this panel too. For this conversation, I would ask us to focus on maybe 3 dimensions. The first is supply chain specific experiences. What are issues that you identify? How do you identify those issues? What are they for your organization? And how do you see yourself engaging the supply chain and the organization for effective supply chain strategies, specifically related to sustainability? Donna, if we could ask, if you could start.
Sure, absolutely. So, you know, at CBS, where I had, you know, the bulk of my experience, I was there for 10 years. I actually had the privilege of building a supplier sustainability program from the ground up. You know, we implemented a environmental purchasing policy. We partnered with suppliers to offer green alternatives to popular, less sustainable items. And we held huge outreach events that were both internal to spread the message internally, but more importantly, external. Again, you're going to hear me say this a lot. that, those best practices should be shared, those innovations, those great suppliers that are offering a lot of these things that we need to be doing more of, need to be kind of shared and create that widespread impact, right? So now here at Sony Pictures, I'm still new to the company, but my department has been partnering with our sustainability group to build sustainability and environmental responsibility into our supply chain and our purchasing process. Again, going back to the basics of making sure that there's an environmental purchasing policy in place, making sure that any type of competitive bids or RFPs, requests for proposals, that we put together include environmental language, and all the suppliers that we are partnering with carry the same values that we do, carry the same message around our responsibility to make sure that everything that we do has a positive impact, and that we are doing what we can to reduce anything that we put out into the environment. The people at Sony Pictures are so passionate about the environment, so that makes our work a little bit easier. But again, it's making sure that our message is evident, right? Not just in our content and showing our actors and characters drinking out of reusable canisters, but also in our culture. And for my role, it's making sure that we include it into our day-to-day operations.
Thank you so very much. John, how about your experience?
So I'm still getting the lay of the land at Ingram, but I would say, our environmental sustainability supply chain issues boil down into three areas. The first is, the global situation with technology and e-waste. Obviously, when we think about those devices, we very seldom think about what happens to them when we're done with them. The cool thing about Ingram is that we actually have a very well-developed industry-leading IT asset disposition service. So we can basically, for our clients, provide reverse logistics, bring back devices that maybe the first user is ready to move on from, repair, refurbish, and remarket those devices and keep them in the marketplace and keep them functioning as long as possible. And then to the extent that they can't be remarketed, we have eSteward certified and R2 certified sites all over the world where we can responsibly recycle and disposition those. So that's really trying to move the technology from that sort of take, make, waste model into a global circular economy. The other two big areas in our industry that we're seeing more interest with our supply chain partners on is the logistics segment. Obviously, when we're talking about a global supply chain, when you've got air, you've got marine, you've got rail, you've got trucks, a lot of GHG emissions and moving these products around, and seeing a lot of activity in working with responsible partners there, putting out new powertrains, moving away from fossil fuels, things of that nature. Even simple things like thinking about the void space. When you pack a truck full of boxes, you don't want to be shipping air because that's wasted fuel, right? So trying to basically get as efficient as we can on the packaging. And then the third area is the packaging itself. It was really interesting watching the presentation from Grove and all the efforts that they're working on with creating a product, personal care service, and other services where we don't have to worry so much about the packaging. But obviously the Achilles heel of the e-commerce business is all the cardboard boxes. And so again, looking at the materials themselves, trying to basically use only recycled content cardboard, but also looking at ways that we can really make that packaging more efficient, from just reducing the materials on the front end to reusing them, and to maybe even, working with the end use consumers to say, well, hey, does it really have to have a box? Where there are different ways that we can deliver their product to you, that we can actually skip that whole packaging phase. So that's what we're working on. And, there's really big challenges on all those problems, but, I'm pretty excited. I think the supply chain is engaged. I think the consumers are speaking, and, the onus is on us just to keep moving things forward.
Thank you very much, John. Danielle.
Supply chain is interesting when you compare. So I'm obviously at Grove now, and prior to this, I was at Williams-Sonoma. So supply chain I think, in my kind of experiences in corporate sustainability, there's the supply chain component of like your purchasing power and the suppliers that you work with, but then also creating the internal structures in order to be able to make those decisions, which is kind of a standalone process. So for example, at Williams-Sonoma, you'll hear from Jennifer later, but they have a goal to be 100% responsibly sourced cotton. So a lot of the work I did there was setting up our teams at Williams-Sonoma to be able to evaluate their inbound cotton they're purchasing, to even know which suppliers had which certifications. So, the question of like, are we purchasing the most sustainable stuff? There's a lot of work, kind of internal processes that might not exist. For example, when I joined Williams-Sonoma, people didn't even know we had that goal. So you're kind of doing a lot of internal education. And then what is responsibly sourced cotton? What are the different certifications? How do we know which vendors have them? So when you talk about supply chain, there is just, kind of endless complexity that is a lot of institutional knowledge, what's available in the space. John was talking about recycled content. That's not totally available. The supply chain issues we're facing right now, like it's easier to get non-recycled cardboard than it is to get recycled cardboard. So like, what do you do in that situation? So sustainability and supply chain really go hand in hand, and there's just kind of so much work that goes into, I think, all the way from the purchasing to setting up the safeguards around supply chain. So what that looks like for me at Grove, obviously you just heard about all the plastic work that we do. We work really closely with our third-party brands to make sure that they're, I would consider them in a lot of cases our supply chain on the third-party brand side. And then on the Grove side, Alex talked about like, we want to switch packaging. How hard is that to do? So on the third-party brand side, we work with them on all the onboarding. Do they have the right certifications? Do they have like Leaping Bunny? And then you're talking about formulation, making sure the formulation standards are up to date and meet our standard. And then, the packaging is a big component. And then on the Grove side, there's, kind of a whole supply chain there. And when you set a goal as ambitious as ours, Alex talked about some of the challenges of getting access to that packaging. One other thing I'll mention is regeneratively sourced, regeneratively grown, basically raw materials are becoming a hot topic. And that's something we're very interested in pursuing, but the supply chain is not there. So we did a project where we were looking for regeneratively sourced coconut oil and we just couldn't find enough, so I think there's an interesting question of how can brands participate in developing a supply chain, to kind of get to a place where they can source everything that they need to. But I would think of sustainability as almost like a filter on top of sourcing and supply chain, which looks very different for different industries.
Thank you. Dominique.
Yeah, I think this is a really hot topic in the industry right now, of course, because of the backlog at both ports of LA and Long Beach. You've seen the news. And so, it's really an interesting moment in time when I think people, producers and also purchasers of materials are trying to figure out like, how can we buy more local, manufacture more local, which in turn, reduces emissions related to the transportation of goods and services. And so from our perspective at American Realty Advisors, our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are relatively small compared to our Scope 3 emissions that, really have to do with supply chain and many, many other things, business travel, et cetera. So we are a private equity firm. We have $10 billion under management that, my charge is to introduce, sustainability policies, et cetera, throughout our portfolio of buildings so that we make an impact and we uphold our fiduciary duty for our investors who are mostly public and municipal and labor management company pension funds. So that's where I'm kind of speaking from. And so in terms of supply chain engagement, I absolutely think that policies are a great place to start if you are a large purchaser, and you may have, or actually you may not have heard, because there's been so many things in the news lately, that the Biden administration opened a 60-day rulemaking on life cycle assessment and basically a federal environmental purchasing policy. And why that matters is the US government is the largest purchaser in the world. They spend $600 billion annually on stuff. And so, thinking about actually a life cycle assessment, the federal government setting a standard for sustainability of products is incredibly important, and it can set off a reaction because local cities will take that policy, other public agencies will take that policy and just institute it for themselves. So that kind of movement and that kind of leadership is really exciting. I'll just speak really briefly about construction materials and how we think about embodied carbon in the supply chain. I think all of us are working through reducing operational carbon in our buildings through energy efficiency projects, fuel switching, a number of different ways, purchasing renewable energy, all of that to get at the operational carbon. But then what about the embodied carbon? Embodied carbon is really, thinking about cradle to grave, or like a manufacturing to disposal of a product. And over time, this is going to be where our emissions lie. Our buildings and our transportation will, be zeroing out carbon over the next decades, but these materials will live on in their impact. So there are environmental product declarations, as well as a database of these declarations that tell you, exactly what is in the product. It's like a nutrition label for a product. And you can see like just how bad is this global warming potential for this steel versus this other steel. And it's based on a number of things, recycled content and location and where it's produced and a number of factors. So anyway, as a purchaser of goods, you can say, we are going to limit embodied carbon emissions. We want, our developments to perform 30% better than the typical new building today. Or we can say, we're going to focus on adaptive reuse because the greenest buildings are the ones that we already have. That carbon is sunk, and we don't need to tear down that building and build a new one. We can just make the one that we have better. So these are all different ways to think about purchasing. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about concrete as a particularly big emitter, particularly in the state of California. And every day people are coming up with new ways to either sequester carbon in concrete or just change the mix of what's in it in order to make it better. So anyway, it's good to have ways to compare products so you can ensure that you are spending your dollars to help move, these green products forward.
Thank you so very much. This is so insightful and multidimensional in ways that you're talking about. What I'd like to do is have us talk a bit about decision-making and collaboration. Danielle, you mentioned in your presentation earlier this dynamic of trade-offs. There's a kind of a process of prioritizing impact, but at the same time, inevitably, you've got these trade-offs and you need to navigate decisions. And so I wonder if each of you could speak about just how you see decision-making in this space and then the dynamic of corporate influence related to this. Sometimes you're dealing maybe with a kind of a direct area of responsibility, or maybe there's more matrix relationships or ways that you're working to build influence. And so could you just speak about what your experiences are in decision-making and in navigating trade-offs? Donna, if we could ask you to start.
Definitely. I mean, one of the biggest things for us in sourcing and procurement is really coming up with those metrics to allow for that decision making, right? So, we can't tell how well we're doing. We can't tell what, key performance indicators we need, what's pointing to all that great work we do without setting some of these baselines, right? Metrics around product usage, ordering from green catalogs, our energy and water consumption, and finally our CO2 emissions and reductions are great ways to set those baselines. But then once we do set those baselines, we need to go and talk to our partners and some of the people who own the various segments to determine, hey, what do you want to set for targets for reducing some of these emissions or increasing efficiency with some of the goods that you're buying or the equipment that you're using, so that we can implement and manage those changes, right? A lot of times it is cost driven, but what are some other elements that drive that? So for us, it's also about time efficiency, product efficiency, and then how can we bring all of that together? A really great example we have is we've been switching out a lot of old tungsten halogen lights, which consume a lot of energy and push out a lot of heat, to LEDs. LEDs are brighter, they're cooler. And what we didn't realize when we did this, early when LED was still a little bit on the pricier side, was that it also had an HVAC impact, right? So, if you've ever been in a stage, it is very, very cold, because when you put the lights on, it heats up the place. So what they do is they pre-chill the place, make it very, very cold. So when the lights come on, the place slowly kind of comes back to life. But the reason it is we have to turn off the HVAC during filming is because it makes noise. The cameras and the microphones pick up that noise, right? So whenever we're making that content, we have to turn that off. So the old tungsten halogen lights put out a lot of heat. The LEDs, not only did they consume less heat, consume less energy, they put out less heat, which allowed us to make, to save money on a lot of that HVAC and cooling costs. So really, it's about putting together just the big picture, not necessarily of just the cost of the good, right? So the light itself was more expensive than the old light, but because it utilized less energy, there was an energy cost savings, and then it utilized less energy for the HVAC. Again, more cost efficiency, and also the talent actually found it a lot more appealing, and the lighting directors found it to be a better product that they could use and learn to manipulate how to utilize the light in more artistic fashion. So it's not just about driving cost, it's about taking a look at all of the things that weigh into those elements, and that's the biggest part of some of the decision making, not just what you can see above the waterline, that tip of the iceberg.
Thank you. And then both, like you say, baseline and then measurement, and then looking at it comprehensively. Yeah, John, your experiences.
I would say mine are actually very similar to Donna's, right down to the findings on LED lights. And I think that's really relevant to our industry, because what we're finding is that a lot of these initiatives, especially thinking of our operations in terms of operating distribution centers and warehouses, is any efficiencies we can find are not only going to be good for the environment, but they're going to be good for the bottom line, because they're saving money. If we can reduce packaging, then we don't have to buy as much cardboard. If we can make trucks more fuel efficient, then the cost of shipping goes down. And the good thing is that a lot of these technologies and approaches are already proving themselves, and LED lights are a great example. It allows us to run our operations more cheaply from a demand charge side, from an energy efficiency side, from an HVAC side, because the lights don't run as hot. But as Donna said, there's also other knock-on benefits. LED light provides more light and better quality light, so it improves safety in the warehouses. So you have fewer safety incidences, fewer workers' comp claims, things of that nature. So I found from 8 years at AEG and a couple months here is as Donna referenced, like if you start sort of looking more holistically at these issues, a lot of times you can find ways to get these projects across the finish line, because there's a lot of drivers to the value that aren't always immediately recognized, that if you really sit down and think about it, you can make a business case pretty easily.
Thank you. Danielle.
Yeah, well, I have the benefit of telling you about trade-offs that maybe are negative and don't have extra. But yeah, I mean, we spoke in the last panel about the trade-offs between plastic and non-plastic alternatives. Obviously, you're trading plastic for materials with a higher carbon footprint there. So I think in sustainability, it's just really important to isolate the variable that you're trying to solve for. There are always going to be trade-offs. In the best cases, they're positive. And I think, as Donna and John described, that's a really elegant solution where you set out to solve one problem and you reach end up with other positive outcomes. But I think in a lot of real life applications, the trade-offs have some things to weigh. And so for us, we have to stay consistent with that high level messaging, a high level goal around reducing plastic, knowing there are short-term implications on our carbon footprint. And that's one reason we set the net zero 2030 goal, is to say, we're aware of this trade-off, but it's not okay with us. It's just kind of what's available to us right now. It's an interim solution. And I think just to be transparent and, kind of honest about the fact that the solutions are imperfect, that you're kind of making the best with what's available to you as a company. If we, are set out on finding materials that have, are absolutely perfect, then I suspect that our products would not be affordable. And in the home essentials business, that wouldn't be very impactful because nobody would buy our product. So, that's another trade-off to think about. So I think, I would say my kind of takeaway is remember what you're isolating for and what specific problem you're trying to solve, because I think anything in sustainability, you can go down a rabbit hole, and kind of say like, well, what about the social impact? What about, carbon footprint, so on. So there's no shortage of complexities.
Thank you. And Dominique.
I absolutely agree with Danielle's comments there. There are no shortage of complexities. I just want to discuss, the importance of engagement, whether it's from, your corporate side to engage with suppliers. Something that's quite popular that I've seen in the market is a supplier excellence survey. And this is a good starting point, I think, to begin to collect data from the vendors that you work with, suppliers that you work with, et cetera. And, it will allow you to ask about their CSR program, how they manage their emissions, if they are in fact prioritizing local and healthy materials, and even the social aspects about, do you have a human rights policy? Do you have a responsible contractor policy? These are all things that you can absolutely ask. And it's really a journey, I think, for suppliers. And the more that we ask, the more that they understand that this is valuable information for their purchasers and investors, et cetera. And in that same vein, I see, an importance here around decision making and, data availability around public-private partnerships. And I had mentioned, the importance to us about being able to compare building materials. And just, an example of such a partnership is the embodied carbon construction calculator. It's called EC3. It was produced by a variety of leaders in the building industry, a university partner, and Microsoft. And through this collaboration, you could now literally go online, go to the tool. It's free. You can search thousands of building materials, compare them, and then make an informed choice. So I think, there's lots of room for engagement, education around, how to move this topic forward, and then how to actually work all together collaboratively. Even competitors can work collaboratively on these kinds of initiatives.
Thank you. And maybe just picking up just two more questions, and I really appreciate what you're offering. This idea of collaboration, especially in a multi-tiered supply chain network for a global company, this is a really robust ask, isn't it? To be able to not just ensure the work of the supply chain and how it supports what your corporate goals are, but building the relationships that enable real collaboration. I'm wondering kind of how you see that and how you see organizations structure themselves to be able to effectively do that. It's one thing to put out a supplier code of conduct, but how do you build the collaborative relationships that really enable them to be successful partners with your organization in fulfilling that broad purpose that you're seeking to achieve? So if you could each just kind of speak to how you experience that, I'd really appreciate that. Donna?
One of the most important things is to get buy-in, right? Not just from your sourcing and procurement team, because again, they're your champions, but to get buy-in from your employees in the entire company, making sure that everybody kind of believes in the message that you're putting together. But then finally, also it's buy-in from the industry. I mean, all of us collectively have power to influence this change. If all of us are asking, our common suppliers to step up and, carry the same message that we do, then we are influencing change on that big macro level, right? So it's really about, sometimes in some areas, it's not about competition. As part of some of the work that I've done with the Green Business Council, I've brought competing companies together and they had never spoken to each other before. And these are procurement professionals or sustainability professionals. And sometimes they have the same problems, right? So I won't say which industry it was, but there were 3 manufacturers and, they were along on a tour and we were touring one of their competitors' locations. And at first they're like, oh, we can't have them come onto our lot. They'll see what we're doing. I'm like, but we want to share these best practices. What if they have the exact same problem when it comes to hazardous materials and waste that you're dealing with, and you can all do the right thing together collectively? You'll still have different products, you'll still have different suppliers, but how you solve those problems sometimes can be found out together. And again, it's better for the environment. You have to look sometimes beyond, your immediate competition. And, we call it, again, we've worked with, Disney and NBC Universal and Viacom CBS, and we all talk to each other and we call it co-opetition, right? Where in some areas where we collectively work together to do the right thing, it helps us all in the long run. And again, we can still compete at the box office and we can still compete on the television, but at the end of the day, when it comes to doing the right thing, we should all be on the same team.
Thank you. Thank you so much. John.
No, I couldn't agree more with Donna. And I think for me, it just boils down to the relationships and having the right people, working on specific projects. And, that's what's been nice. This is a great community of green professionals. But, I always like to really work hard on the relationships within my own organization and really try to plant seeds of ideas. And, as they go into building commercial relationships, they start thinking about some of these things, and then they bring in, our counterparts in the other organization, and it goes from there. So I just really can't emphasize enough just building the relationships and leveraging that goodwill, because it can be really important.
Thank you so much. Danielle.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is also important in terms of just starting with asking the question. So even if suppliers are not necessarily ready, or have that preparedness to give you the answers and the data that you need, you have to start by, kind of putting the framework for disclosure out there. And I think that's a really important first step, just to kind of start the process. I think Donna's point on buy-in is exactly right, but, certainly don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and just start the process in terms of, kind of putting one foot in front of the other and starting to collect the information that you need to understand where you are on this journey. So, kind of global supply chain, incredibly complex, but in a lot of ways, there's no perfect solution. Again, so you just have to, kind of go with the most rigorous and replicable methodology you have for collecting that information. And that starts, one supplier at a time, one relationship at a time.
And thank you. And Dominique.
Thanks. I'll keep it short since I know we're running short on time. I'll just offer that I have found in my career, networks of professionals, and particularly people that you can talk to around the globe, offer so many rich ideas because, they're in different regions. They may have similar issues or very disparate issues from yours, but in getting to work with people from the Netherlands and Australia and UK, and I've just really been able to broaden my knowledge of what is possible. Going back to construction, I think there are 5 electric earth movers in the world, and they all happen to be in Europe. But good thing you can talk to them about what it is and potentially engage with the manufacturers of these types of equipment to say, like, hey, LA wants electric earth movers too, and so does San Francisco, and so does New York. And so, like, these conversations can really move the needle in terms of, like, informing what is possible abroad that can be brought here too.
Thank you so much. And one final question, and thank you for letting us go over a little bit. a big part of our audience are college students, a number of undergrads who are seniors and getting ready to launch their careers. What advice related to sustainability and your professional experience, what advice would you give them, or would you point out or highlight? This is an opportunity for seasoned professionals to share a little wisdom. Donna?
All right. Again, for me, I love talking to people. I mentor a lot of students. I employ a lot of my former interns, and how I find interns are outreach events like this. So I would say be fearless, be relentless, but be humble, right? Be fearless and put yourself out there to meet people. When I say, hey, look me up on LinkedIn, connect with me. Usually after events like this that were in person, I'd hand out my business cards, and I'd almost be kind of disappointed that I didn't hear from these people. It's like, if somebody gave you their business card or somebody said, contact me, do it, contact them. I mean, the worst that'll happen is maybe they're too busy and they won't get to you. But, if they're putting themselves out there, you should put yourself out there and really connect and meet these people, because they're looking for other people who have the passion that they do. Right. And when they do that, they're building teams with, passionate people. Be relentless in the pursuit of your passions, but be humble enough to, learn from those who have done it before, who are looking to do something, but do it better, do it together, bring your, voice to that thing. But again, don't be afraid. They're not gonna shout at you, yell at you, and say horrible things. At the most, you maybe not hear from them, but at the best, you built a connection. You found yourself a mentor. You found a good, future opportunity, or at the very least, you found somebody who imparted some wisdom, or maybe you have something that you can share with them. Because I am always learning and growing, so I'm always looking to meet, all those people that are looking and growing. So with that, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm going to throw my information in the chat. I'm also going to throw the Green Business Council in the chat. We are always looking for, new vision and new blood to come and join us in some of those things. But connect, be fearless, be relentless, be humble, and connect.
Thank you so much. Danielle?
I think this is a great question. I like Donna's advice. The worst people can say is no. I think my advice is don't let the perfect, again, be the enemy of the good. Not every job can be a climate job. I'm going to put something in the chat from Drawdown Labs called Climate Solutions at Work. So we need all of your talent. You might not find a sustainability job coming out of school, and that's okay. Just find a job that has a dimension where you can enact change, or where you can build a skill, because that gets you ultimately to where you want to be. So think of jobs as kind of a stepping stone to ultimately where you want to be and what skills you need to build to get there. Because there is no, kind of corporate sustainability job that is, necessarily entry level. The reality is you're going to have to build some skills to get into the space. So be strategic about that. Think about what part of sustainability is interesting to you. Is it social impact? Is it environmental impact? Is it the measurement? And really become an expert in that area. And kind of make your job, even if it's not perfect, make it a climate job. Figure out, that's very much how I got into the space, is just raise your hand for those opportunities and find them, continue to build out the skills. And I would say, kind of really keep that determination at heart, and don't get discouraged if, the next job and even the one after that isn't the perfect job. It's a journey.
Thank you so much. John?
Definitely agree with Donna and Danielle. My advice, and I'm a little reluctant to, call out this person specifically, but I still think it's a great example. So Elon Musk says a lot of crazy things, but basically he cared about the environment and understood the issue that we were working on. And his car was really awesome. Like, it wasn't just a good electric car. It's superior to like the competition in every way, except maybe for range. Although I would argue that's not really a huge issue for most drivers. And so that would be my advice, is make your solution or your product superior to the non-sustainable or less sustainable alternative. And then you don't have to sort of like hang your pitch on that. And so I always try to think of that. And, I would go back to what Alex at Grove said is, the customers want a good product, but if it doesn't perform, they're not going to make that sacrifice. So make sure that you beat the competition fair and square, and that it's more sustainable. Now, that can be more difficult, but that's ultimately where we have to go, because we do live in a consumer-based society, and that's what we have to achieve.
Thank you so much, John. And Dominique, our LMU Lion.
Thank you. I would just encourage, every student to, find that one thing about sustainability that really makes you tick, whether it's waste reduction, protecting natural resources, whether it's green finance, real estate, whatever it is, and just get involved in any club or nonprofit organization so you can build yourself a network of people that are similarly interested, because those people will stay with you, they will mentor you, they will answer your questions, they'll be there for you because you have that tie that binds. So I would say, find the passion and then nurture the passion.
Thank you so very much. Passion and aspiration. I'm thinking of Partnership for the Goal, Sustainable Development Goal number 17, really what you're profiling in this, just so wonderful. Thank you very much, really appreciate it. And we're going to hold off on the question and answer because we maybe do that a little later in the afternoon, just in deference to time, if that's okay. But thank you so much. It's been really, really profound and really insightful. So I'm going to ask Sheree if you could kindly put up our QR code for our students for our CBA Advantage opportunity. And then when that appears, let's take our 5-minute break. Here it goes. And then let's take our 5-minute break. It is now 1:43. We will start again at 1:48, okay? 1:48, thank you. Let's come back to our session. And if we could kindly set up our next panel. Okay, thank you. And while that is taking place, we are really honored to have our next panel to continue this conversation. And the 4 panelists are Lisa Matthiessen, Sustainable Buildings Manager, Worldwide Sustainability, Amazon. Tami McCrossen-Orr, Director, Environmental Sustainability and Compliance, Los Angeles World Airports. Elizabeth Schenk, Executive Director of Environmental Stewardship, Providence. And Dean Dale Smith, Professor, Leadership and Organizational Behavior, College of Business Administration. And so if I could ask each of you, first, just an introduction of yourself and your both professional experience and work related to sustainability. And then we'll have the same kind of shared conversation that we just had, okay? Elizabeth, maybe if we could begin.
Sure, thank you so much. It's my honor to be with you today. Beth Schenk, I'm the Executive Director of Providence for Environmental Stewardship. Providence is a large health system, one of the largest in the nation, with over 50 hospitals, 1,000 clinics, 120,000 caregivers, and an enormous environmental footprint. We set the goal last year to become carbon negative by 2030. And so that is what I live and dream about every single moment. Look forward to talking with you about it.
Thank you so much. Lisa.
Hi, Lisa Matthiessen with Amazon. Elizabeth and I know each other from another life, which is kind of fun. So I'm actually an architect and have done a lot of work in design and construction around sustainability. Joined Amazon about 10 months ago, working in category management, so supply chain. But now I moved over to Worldwide Sustainability, which is the group internal to Amazon that oversees Amazon's pledge to be carbon neutral by 2040. The space I'm working in is mostly on the building portfolio size, which Amazon has a pretty big building program, as you might imagine. But I'm also within the group that handles all of sustainability governance across products and consumers as well. So my quick additional comment to that is it's actually quite enlightening and invigorating to move from the consultant side, where I was always trying to persuade owners to do the right thing, to be on the owner's side, where I get to tell my consultants to do the right thing. I like this better.
A career goal.
Yes.
Tami, thank you.
Sure. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the Director of Environmental Sustainability and Compliance for Los Angeles World Airports, otherwise known as LAWA. For those of you who don't know, and this might be a lot, LAWA is actually a department of the city of Los Angeles. And we own and operate Los Angeles International Airport, Van Nuys General Aviation Airport, and we have large land holdings in Palmdale that have been reserved for an airport for quite some time. We manage the land out there as well. LAWA is a LAX, as I'm sure you've all, if you live in LA, you've all been through LAX most likely. It's an incredibly large and industrial site. There's a lot of industrial activity that happens at the airport, from fueling airplanes, operating heavy equipment. And if you've been through LAX anytime lately, it's also a giant construction site right now. We're in the midst of a multi-billion-dollar modernization program. We'll be bringing, finally connecting LAX to regional rail in the city of Los Angeles. So in the not too distant future, you'll be able to take a train, let's say from Union Station all the way to LAX. That's our automated people mover system that will connect the central terminal area at LAX to 3 offsite locations, 2 intermodal transportation facilities, and the consolidated rental car facility at one of the ITF stations will be connected to the Metro, and that will be Metro's Crenshaw line. So it's a giant transformation of the airport, inside and out. And we're very, very excited to bring that. But we can't build anything without keeping sustainability at the front of the project. Our projects are very large. They involve, years-long environmental review and incredible community and stakeholder involvement. And since before I got to LAX, the community has been pushing the airport to move forward aggressively on sustainability. And that's the fun job that I get to do, is make sure we keep our promises and we keep pushing forward. So really happy to be here, and really interesting panel to hear about. We're just the center that all the goods travel through. So it's very interesting to hear about, the source and the destination for these goods.
Yes, thank you. And of course, at Loyola Marymount, you're our neighbor. So want to just really affirm that. And Tami also is also a Loyola alum.
Yes.
From Loyola Law School. And so
yes, thank you.
Recognize
the
that
Lions.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure. As Jeff introduced me earlier, I'm the Dean of the College of Business Administration, but in terms of this question, the role as a sustainability executive, actually the College of Business Administration was the first in the university to become a signatory to PRIME, that is the United Nations Principles of Responsible Management Education. Jeff is really my partner in this, and it commits our entire college, our students, our faculty, and our curriculum to really respond to how we're making progress on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and how business can be a force of good to create a more sustainable global community. So our mission as a College of Business, our strategic plan, and the curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular programming are what's really key to creating the kinds of leaders that these 3 women in the room can hopefully hire. Additionally, I bring some experience as a trustee of something called the GRLI, the Globally Responsible Leader Initiative, which is a group of deans, directors, and corporate leaders, kind of like a think tank, but beyond a think tank, it's really a collective looking at and exploring what are the things we can do and how do we collaborate with the United Nations, non-governmental organizations, companies, the AACSB. So around the world, rather than all of these groups just thinking about the issues, how can we create action to bring these folks together? And needless to say, as a teacher and somebody who does work in the area of organizational communication and benefit corps, I'm engaged in how we train leaders to be active proponents of sustainable transformation in our communities, in our businesses, and beyond borders and boundaries. And to Tami, I live close to the airport, and I'm hoping that one of those sustainable things will be whisper jets that truly whisper. Anyway, looking forward to the panel discussion.
We're going to try to keep this away from advocacy. Well, so what we'd like to do for this portion of our discussion is really first just ask each of you, in listening to the presentation from Grove Collaborative, in listening to the panel discussion that we just had, what struck you and what would you highlight that you experience as resonating with your professional experience and how you see the work of sustainability? Lisa, perhaps we can begin with you.
Oh, thank you, because I had so many thoughts. I think the simple version would be that it was really fun listening to these last few panels. There was just so much that resonated, and very nice to kind of hear echoes of what I've been learning in my time at Amazon about how we make change at a truly meaningful scale. I think some of the comments that I wrote down, there were, and these were running through both panels. One was about good before perfect, that it's better to make small steps now than to try to wait until we get it perfect. And another way to say that is this is a landscape that's going to change, and it's going to change rapidly. So we have to be nimble and keep moving. Another thing a thread I heard was that the blocks we have to a really sustainable future are not technical. They're cultural, they're political, they're, the way our economy is set up, it's not a technical issue. It's more a willpower issue. And I think we all kind of knew that, but I think it is really actually true when you get to putting the rubber on the road. One of the things I'm really thinking about at Amazon is how to leverage scale. And, that is one of the things we can do as Amazon is we can, and we very much do this, we'll think about moves we want to make that involve asking a change from the market. And we think about how our scale can make that happen. And it was really nice to hear Dominique shout out what this administration is doing, the federal administration, because that has long been the role of government at the state level and the federal level to try to make those changes by pushing industry. That said, I think we're at a point culturally where it's much harder to rely on the government and on the political system to try to make the changes we need to make. So I think it's really awesome that you've put these panels together that are the private side trying to address this problem, because I think that's where a lot of the movement is right now. Other things I heard were about engaging the customer. One of the things I'd heard about Amazon before I joined, though it has turned out to be absolutely true, is that it is an organization that is customer driven. So it's less thinking about what our competitors are doing and more about what our customers want. And I think that's what we heard from Grove Collaborative very strongly. But I also heard from both groups a lot about the importance of engaging customers. And I think that's a really big point, because at the end of the day, the changes we need to make have to be from people wanting things and people getting, and I think there's so much power in engaging our customers in the process. I also loved what Grove had to say about being really transparent, that they don't have all the answers, and asking customers for help, I think is really important. And I'm almost there. The importance of collaborating with and supporting our suppliers. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is around trying to get the industry to understand what Amazon wants, and realizing that they're going to need our help to get them there, and that's fine. I think that's a really important role for us to play. So it is a collaborative sport, and then sort of this comes along with that is the importance of communication between owners, with suppliers, all of it. We need to be talking a lot more. Thanks. Those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll circle back in a second, but thank you so much. Elizabeth.
Thank you. I agree, it was really interesting to hear both panels, and it provoked lots of thoughts in my mind. In healthcare, we come at our organizational commitments from the aspect of caring. We're here to serve, we're here to care, especially in Catholic healthcare and nonprofit healthcare. And our mission is really to serve the poor and vulnerable first, primarily. And I think, it's really important that all of who I've heard so far has really talked a bit about values and about aligning our commitments as an organization and as individuals in the organization with both personal and organizational values. One of those values for us, of course, is health. And I would say that while it has seemed obvious to me for a long time that a healthy planet is necessary for human health, that has become much stronger in terms of public sentiment in the past, I would say 5 years. And I think that might be related in part because of what we're seeing in climate change in our world where we live. We're located from Alaska to Texas. And so all along the West Coast, this has been a real issue that has helped transform leadership across our health system. So I just say that as background that gives us a sense of urgency and also reminds us always that our commitment is about health and service. But what I was really thinking a lot about was plastic, because it is such an enormous problem in healthcare.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been to see a clinician or into a hospital, you know what that means. And plastics carry with them certain harmful chemicals. So that's another thing that links back to health, but also to the availability of alternatives, which is in large part are not very available. So this is something that I'm really anxious to see. I'm anxious for change. This is not only in supply chain, but it's in chemistry. It's in development, R&D. We really need to move toward plastics that are not harmful, plastics that are not fossil fuel based, but we need the characteristics of plastic. We need it to be, impermeable to liquid. We need it to be transparent, lightweight, versatile, flexible, and affordable. So that's just an enormous challenge. And I'm pleased to hear about Grove's approaches and solutions. And as I think about scaling those up, not only to the volume that we use in healthcare, but the intensity of the use. We need it now. We need it to be reliable 100% of the time. We are literally saving lives with the products we use. And yet we're up against this wall of the harm that comes from some of those products. So we can see that on a bigger scale, for instance, with energy use, that we can wrap our heads around. But sometimes with the products themselves in supply chain that we buy, plastics are one, but there's really quite a few, that we don't have transparency in terms of what are they made of? What are the chemicals? What are the upstream impacts? And so I think it's a brilliant conversation and one that we really need solutions for in healthcare. So I'm interested to continue to talk. So thank you. Talk with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tami.
And I'll go ahead and unmute. I was really struck what throughout all the panels and the presentations, there's a common theme, and we're already talking about that, is that it's education, stakeholder involvement, that no one company can do sustainability by themselves. Grove cannot solve the plastic problem by itself. Grove has to have suppliers who make products that are not plastic. It's for their home care and their beauty care products. You have to have customers that want to buy that. You have to have a supply all and logistics that are committed to carbon-free delivery. And even if all of Grove's all of Grove's products were not plastic, how are they being delivered? Are they delivered on a pallet that's wrapped by plastic? Well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. And so what really struck me is that sustainability is going to take every single one of us. And I think my experience at the airport has really driven that home within the airport ecosystem. All of our sustainability programs, the ones that are successful, are the ones that we've developed in collaboration with the airlines, with the operators, and with our neighbors and our community. And those are the most successful programs. And maybe we didn't get, maybe there were constituents out there who want all electric everything at the airport. And the airlines are completely opposed to that because it's just not possible right now. And so maybe we didn't get the best, maybe we didn't get the most environmentally friendly program. We have ground support equipment that operates on the airport that is not electric, and that's because it doesn't exist. And but we have a program, and we have made significant we've achieved our goals, and we've made a significant positive impact on reducing emissions from the operation of ground support equipment. If we had just stopped and said, it's impossible, I cannot bring these sides together, we would have nothing. So I think that goes along with what Lisa was saying. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. We have to do something. And to build on that, my experience at the airport, I can tell you, is maybe we didn't get the perfect thing the first time. But that doesn't mean that that's the end of the conversation and that's the end of the story. Get that program. If all you can get is 50% electric, well, then go and do that, because that's better than what we have now. But keep that conversation going and identify the time and the opportunity to take the next step. And that's something that we have done at the airport as well. We have programs for our ground support equipment. We have programs for medium and heavy duty trucks. We just in the last 2 to 3 years, we've updated those programs. We've been able to work with the community, work with the airlines, work with the operators, and say, hey guys, look, it's what we set out to do. We've achieved those goals. It's working. You guys are able to do this. You're able to use cleaner pieces of equipment. You're able to find there are more electric pieces of equipment available out there. Let's take our program to the next level. Here's we do our research. When we do these programs, we don't just go out and say, I want everything to be electric. We start first by studying and looking at what's possible, because we want to be prepared for when somebody comes and says, no, that's impossible. We can say, no, actually, we've looked at all of this. Here's the available equipment. Here's it costs. So you've got to also do your research, so you can anticipate the obstacles and the roadblocks. And we've just had great success at the airport in launching good programs, and then coming back and always looking at and evaluating those programs and taking those opportunities to improve and strengthen those programs. On our way to, our board has pushed us to be carbon neutral by 2045, but I think things might be changing. As I'm saying, you set your first goal, and maybe there'll be an opportunity to set a better goal. So I look forward to continual change and improvement.
Thank you so much. Dale.
Yeah, it's funny. I took, as a true educator, I took lots and lots of notes, and there's probably 50 common areas that I could pull from. So I was trying to figure out how I could narrow those down. So I'm going to do my top 10 takeaways from the panels. But I think one of the most powerful ones that we heard from the case of Grove is they're mission driven to make the world better. In other words, it's not just how they're making the money, but the mission matters. And the power of culture, and Lisa spoke to this as well just a moment ago, that the power of culture to shift beyond single-use plastics, and then doing that by focusing on things that you change easily. You can innovate, but if you don't get folks to change behavior, you're not going to go from plastic neutral to plastic free. So it's okay to be an incrementalist. And I thought that was powerful. But then they really talked about what you measure matters. That's certainly true in education sectors too. What you measure matters. Love the 7-step process of measure it, mitigate, get into the weeds, plan around it, innovate, communicate, and then repeat, right? Those 7 steps are suggesting you're not going to get it right on the first time, but you're constantly, continuously improving. And I think that's true in the way we educate and in the way we think about business tools. So as a business school, we give the toolbox to our students to use these tools to make a contribution in business. And that's why, you know, 7-step processes like that matter, and you have to try it and you have to innovate and repeat. I thought that was really important. Many people on the different panels, and including my colleagues in the room here, talked about collaboration as a key dynamic of any business strategy. But you have to appreciate that with collaboration, there's those trade-offs. And I loved one of the panelists who spoke about even getting competitors in the same room and your suppliers. That's such a critical part of it. And then getting people to recognize, and I think Grove did this really well, when you get agreement on an issue, it's much easier to get to that behavioral change. And without behavioral change, you know, you can't just trust your downstream suppliers to follow your code. What's the old saying? Trust but verify. And that requires collaboration and training and other things. From the second panel, I really took away the diversity of the sectors who are doing work in this space. That's encouraging to me. People are talking about their stakeholders differently. When I was in business school, you know, a zillion years ago, the stakeholder was synonymous with the shareholder. But now we talk about stakeholders in such a different way, and that is a powerful move forward in how business can be a force for good. And business is a first mover in this space, even though we often get criticized. So widespread impact happens as you start to look at collective action, best practices, sharing innovations. I thought that was a really powerful message that came out. Love the comment about reverse logistics to recycle components. You know, again, it's looking at how can innovation be key, and then how do we maybe use open source to get that innovation out there so that we can be operating as a collective, and that's trading it off with profit. See, there's so many things to balance here. Like the comment about cradle to grave thinking, what is our impact? And as a leadership scholar, then how are leaders responsible for motivating behavior throughout the organization, downstream and upstream in the supply chain? Let's follow ethical sourcing, right? How can we do that? And then finally, the last takeaway I thought that was really important was the notion of you've got to take conscious strategies. Again, it's that incremental theme, as folks were talking about the LED lights and efficiencies, but still having a bottom line orientation. This works when you and your company can make the business case and recognizing the trade-offs, but still getting the buy-in. And all of those pieces come together. And for all of our students here, what I hope you're sensing, as you heard from all of these panelists, is that the things you're learning in your business classes directly link to the applications that all of our panelists over the last 2 panels have introduced, and the few things that Tami and Lisa and Elizabeth just talked about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dale. You know, one thing that struck me in maybe if I could frame the next question this way, and just from kind of a time management standpoint, we're going to have about 10 more minutes. And so I'm going to ask you this question, and then I'm going to ask you about advice for our students. But sometimes when we talk about the question of sustainability and need, we tend to talk about the negative impact of so many of our structures, systems, businesses, et cetera, and really look at how to mitigate harm. But also, you're talking a lot about the need to build out capacity so that we have the ability to do what we know needs to be done. And then that strikes me as a place of profound opportunity, areas for development. Sometimes I think of our students, you know, graduating in the 40 years of their professional lives, what will be the profound innovations that will revolutionize so much of this around finding opportunity in the very spaces to build out ability to deliver on what we know needs to happen. So just maybe with a little bit of that as framing, how do you see, or what would you see as important goals, either sustainability goals or business goals that you would highlight out of your experience and really out of this conversation that would be maybe top of mind? Lisa, can I start with you again?
Yeah. And are you asking us to include the advice to students, or we're going to come back around for that?
We're going to come back to the students.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is not necessarily, I'm thinking about the way you just phrased that question, and the answer I'm going to give you is going to be more about what I think matters for sustainability and less about what matters for Amazon, although let's hope they're the same. But I think next steps are going to include, and this got mentioned a few times, a much better sharing of information. We have got to get to the point, and there's a lot of information that needs to be shared, and there's a lot of, again, speaking from Amazon's perspective, we do a lot of things that are really awesome that I would love to shout about, and we can't because of the, issues around confidentiality. But I'd love to find ways, and I know we're looking for ways to start to share what we're learning so that all of us, we can raise all the boats together. And I think that's a very genuine sentiment that we're hearing today, but I think it's also a reality. So I think I'm looking forward to how we start to learn to share what we're learning with each other. And I think also what we're all seeing today is the incredible complexity of the supply chain, and starting to really understand the supply chain at every level and start to mobilize the supply chain towards these goals we're all trying to meet, so that it's not an owner over here and a contractor over there who's pushing for this, but it's a synthesized effort, I think is going to be where we need to go next.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Well, a goal and a challenge related to supply chain specifically, I'm going to answer with the phrase nutritional labeling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some companies are doing this. They're really giving us transparent data about the sourcing, the carbon impacts, the embodied carbon in whatever it is that they're selling. But this, I really think this is going to be so common in 5 years or maybe 10 years, but I hope this decade, that consumers, both individual and corporate consumers, will have what the information we need, because right now really we're largely in the dark, I would say. And with that information, we've seen it happen with nutritional labeling and other good quality verifiable information that's available for decision making. It changes the playing field. So I think that's both a challenge and a solution, and I look forward to that. So that's another call out to students and others who could bring innovation to that space. It's complicated, but important. Thank you.
Thank you. Tami.
I think a goal for supply chain, and I'm happy to have Amazon here and healthcare representatives, the consumers or the purchasers of products need to start insisting that we have sustainable products. And it's not just the product, it's also the supply chain. How are we getting the product? How is it delivered? How are we getting that last mile delivery as well? It's all of it. And these Amazon can drive change. The city of Los Angeles, we're a huge purchaser. We can drive change. We have the political will. The city needs to get themselves very organized, which they are definitely trying to do, and start insisting that no, we want only environmentally preferred products, and we need to define that as the entire, not just the product itself, but the entire supply chain.
Thank you so much. And Dale.
Yeah, I think the first step is you have to recognize that at every leadership level of any organization, you've got to accept that culture and strategy are inextricably linked. What is so very clear to me is that how leaders create culture around the outcomes they want to see in sustainability depends on what we incent, reward, what we resource, what we measure. Otherwise, it's just lip service and a nice thing on your mission statement. Cultures and subcultures within an organization can be a total barrier to sustainability initiatives, and also downstream in the decision your suppliers are making. So yeah, you have to lead around mission and a strategic plan, but whether it's a business school or a large manufacturer, you are only as impactful as your downstream supply chain. So if you're not helping together to collaborate and set up standards, incenting that, and working as you find an innovation, or you sharing what you learn, I just believe it absolutely takes a community. The second step is to really think about the notion of how technology can help with ethical sourcing. And I see in the chat, somebody asked about how blockchain can impact sustainability and information sharing. As you start to track what ethical sourcing looks like as a business goal, and you start developing innovative technology that enables business solutions that impact the whole process, you can really make a difference. And I'm struck by one particular example I'll share, and then I'll stop there. When I talk about open sourcing, where technology and the innovation is the true game changer, you still have to ensure that a company is able to recoup investment and can be profitable, while also ensuring that you can take that open source perspective to have more users with greater impact. So here's a specific example. Mercedes years ago developed incredible technology and innovation around a collision impact in their vehicles. And it was so game-changing in terms of safety for a collision that they shared that technology with every automobile manufacturer around the world. This is powerful to me because that technology saved my daughter, not in a Mercedes, but in an old used Honda that had that technology in it, and it saved her life. You know, so again, that sort of thing happens when the strategy and culture are aligned, when there's tri-sector work with governments, NGOs, and business, and remembering that what you measure, what you reward, what you allocate to change behavior, whether that's incentives or tax policy or other things that you can use within a business with your downstream and upstream suppliers. That's how you make impact happen.
Thank you so very much. And now here's the student advice question. What advice or what would you highlight, especially for our students as you think about sustainability and their careers? Elisa, circling back to you.
Well, going from my own experience, I would say you should shop around. I have had quite a career of moving around, and it's worked for me to be in a place and do what I could do there, but then move if you need to. And I would especially say that having come from one industry, from design and construction, into a completely different industry, and I'm completely shocked by the culture change. So be aware that there's real cultural differences in certain industries. Certainly design and construction is quite conservative and old-fashioned, and it's amazing to be in a different kind of a place. I would say that the best employers are looking for candidates who can communicate, who can think, and who are collaborative. The technical stuff you've learned is great, but it's the people skills you've learned and your passion that's going to get you somewhere. And again, most good companies are looking for really smart, driven people, and that's what they're looking for.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth.
I just hired someone just this week after months, and I saw about 60 applicants. I was totally impressed with all of them. Okay, not all, most of them. There's so much skill, talent, and commitment in young people, and I'm just thrilled about that. So what I saw was that I think would be helpful for a new grad particularly is you got to get some experience, even an internship or a project that you take to completion in your undergrad that you can claim results for and put that on your resume. I think that's very helpful, or they just don't even get to people who are hiring. And then I think there are 3 areas that are worth fleshing out your skills and talking about. One of them is in analytics. I do think this is data-driven work, and you got to know your way around a spreadsheet. I just think we all do. Second is just what Lisa said about communication, team building, encouraging, incentivizing, engaging, really engaging. I say engagement is the secret sauce. So if you have skills with engagement, that's key. And then the third is strategy. All of us are finding our way here. And the playing field changes a lot. We have to re-strategize, rethink. And so we need different points of view and different ways to come in. So good luck to all of you as students in your careers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tami.
Well, I'll bring a government perspective. There are a lot of jobs in government, all levels of government. There are a lot of environmental jobs. There's sustainability jobs. There's finance jobs. There's design and construction jobs. There are a lot of jobs in government. And the difficulty is I don't know if students know exactly how to break in. That's the difficulty to finding the jobs in government, is figuring out how to break in. There are opportunities for internships, paid internships, unpaid internships. Look for those opportunities, especially, I mean, the city of Los Angeles, we're huge. There are so many opportunities. Come work at the airport, go work downtown. Dominique, on the last panel, she worked at the mayor's office. They're doing amazing things. seek out those opportunities, push your colleges to help you guys find those opportunities, because that's the best way to break into government employment. And there are very good jobs where you can have an impact in government. It's not all politics. There are we are doing things, especially in sustainability. We have, there's our Department of Water and Power. It's amazing what those people do. There's our sanitation. If you're looking for environmental jobs, tons of jobs in those two departments. And the airport, really, honestly, we have everything. If you want to do really incredibly complex procurement, we've got that here. The Los Angeles, we have I think it's the second design, build, finance, operate, and maintain project in the whole state of California. There's exciting opportunities, so find them. Also, networking is also the key. Just keep in touch with the people you meet. Use LinkedIn.
Thank you so very much. Dale, I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to kind of piggyback a couple of things. So while you're sharing, if it's okay, if we can also post the QR code, and
Absolutely.
then we will then be transitioning into our final presentation, which is Jennifer Gootman from Williams-Sonoma. So Sheree, if you could pull up the QR code while Dale, you're sharing.
I'll give 4 pieces of advice that I want all of our students to have. 1, mission matters and alignment is key. So vote with your feet, who you work for, but also what those companies do. As consumers, whether you're seeking a job, whether the consumer is in a B2B relationship, or whether you're a retail consumer, recognize you have power. Your demand determines the product and service offering. How do you want it to appear? So you have power when you vote with your feet. Second advice, be true to yourself and and if you're passionate about sustainability, then look for opportunities in that space. Our colleagues here in the room really shared all of the different kinds of things you should be looking for. So find companies whose values match your own and do your homework. Investigate who are their suppliers. Is it more than just a mission statement? Companies need to choose their talent wisely, so be sure that you're also interviewing them while they're interviewing you. The third thing, and this is probably the advice I give in any context to every student, is develop your managerial toolbox. What you're looking for is portability. What do you have to offer that makes a difference? And with each internship and job that you take, grow your knowledge, ability, and skills, because when you grow your toolbox, that gives you portability to bring that impact to other organizations. And then the last bit of advice, education is so much more than what happens in the classroom. And I hope the faculty in the room will forgive me for saying this, but I bet they all agree. There are badges, there are micro-credentials, the networking, all of the extracurricular and co-curriculars, like sitting today in this symposium. This is helping you know not only what you know, but it's helping you answer the question, what can you do? What can you offer? And when you put all of that together, that really makes a compelling case to an employer to want you to be a part of what they do. So if you're working on sustainability initiatives and projects here in the College of Business, and you're looking to work in the space that my 3 colleagues in the room are working in, be able to tell them not only what you know, but what you can do, what you've done, what your projects show. Because when you can showcase that, you're going to make a compelling case for why you can make a contribution to their mission and goals for trying to make a difference around sustainability.
Thank you so very much, and that's absolutely wonderful. Sheree, quickly, there was a question about whether or not the QR code that was posted was for this presentation or for the one that's coming up. So I just want to have you look at that. As we introduce our next panelist and presenter, and that's Jennifer Gootman from Williams-Sonoma. We're really honored to have Jennifer with us today. And she is going to speak about their Good by Design initiative. And Jennifer, would you like me to share your PowerPoint, or would you like to do that? Just kind of checking in on the details.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. I'm fine to share. I can do that
great.
now. Yeah.
And let me just affirm that we're going to have a hard stop at 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock for Jennifer. So just to share that with everyone. And Jennifer, if you could just introduce yourself, and so just delighted to have you with us and to end a really wonderful afternoon with the inspirational message and business initiatives that you're going to be sharing with us.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And it was great. I caught the last two panels and certainly, some consistent themes throughout. So just really exciting to see that converge. I think sometimes, working in this space, you can be so kind of head down within your company, and to kind of see all of the cross-sectoral opportunity and challenges is really great. But I run all of the sustainability and social impact programs at Williams-Sonoma Inc. and across its family of brands. I'm kind of been with the company since 2013. I can tell you a little bit about that journey, but I'm, a bit of a kind of odd career trajectory. I spent a decade in the nonprofit sector in arts, economic development. I also went back to school, got my MBA mid-career, really about a decade ago at NYU, and, focused on bringing together business and impact. Returned to the nonprofit sector after school, actually running a nonprofit that helped organize groups of artisans reach external markets. And it was through that work that I came across one of the brands, West Elm, and saw their commitment to the artisan space and the potential for impact, and thought about, even if you can make kind of incremental change in a large company, the scale that can bring, and pitched my role. So kind of for all those career seekers. And it was just around the time that West Elm was about to make some public commitments around its work and craft. The company had been doing work in sustainability for, over a decade at that time, but really was not talking about it so much publicly. As a publicly traded company, there was some sort of, hesitation to really communicate publicly. And so that first commitment to craft was the first foray. And so I joined in 2013, spearheading that commitment, and then, have really been an entrepreneur, creating my career throughout. So, expanded from craft to launch our fair trade program. We scaled that across the brands in 2017. Around that time, I took on oversight for all of our global social compliance, so health, safety, human rights across our global supply chain. And that was what enabled us really to scale some of those programs like fair trade. During a time for about 2 years, I ran the West Elm local program, which was how we work with local makers. So we had locally curated assortments in all of our stores, over 1,000 makers. So I had a merchant team. And then in 2019, I moved into a cross-brand role exclusively, overseeing all of our social and environmental programs. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that. But, it's been really just, it's about kind of not knowing all the answers, but, solving problems and asking the right questions. I think we've heard that pretty consistently. I sit within the company. First I was within the brand, and I think that really enabled us to be business driven and integrated into the brand and that proposition. So that's a huge, I think, theme that you see throughout this. And then I sit within sourcing and supply chain now. So kind of back to that, supply chain as a consumer products company, home furnishings company. Supply chain is our biggest impact, beyond kind of our operations. So I'll speak a little bit to that and how I work cross-functionally. And, I think one thing that really strikes me kind of in this work, where I also feel like there's a lot of opportunity, is the communication and training piece. So, we directly own as a team, certain elements of sustainability, but so much is through influence and engagement, and having an educated employee base. And when you have, number of employees in the tens of thousands, you really need platforms, systems, and tools. And so actually this tagline, "Good by Design," really came out of encouragement from our board of directors to say, you're doing so much, how do you simplify the way that you speak about it and come up with a framework that allows people to tie it back to that framework and recognize it? So there are a lot of kind of concrete sort of skills or learnings that I'm going to weave throughout this. And I'll go fairly quickly so that we can save some time for questions at the end and some dialogue. So Good by Design. And under that, we have our pillars: planet, people, and purpose. And so this really, relating everything back to these pillars, helps it feel cohesive to drive progress across these. Now, loosely, this is tied back to ESG, which you may have heard, which is, what the investment community, the acronym Environmental, Social, and Governance is what it stands for. And that's what the investment community uses to refer to non-financial metrics that they consider material to financial performance in companies. So I think another thing that we've heard here is it's about integrating into the business. And I think Danielle, my former colleague at Williams-Sonoma, now at Grove, really aptly, spoke about the economics aren't always going to be there in the short term, but a lot of this work is about your long-term resilience and strategy as a company. So within People, Planet, and Purpose, we have existing goals. A lot of these have been around since 2015. You can read all about them in our impact report. I'm not going to go into these in quite detail, but they're about around wood, around cotton, around landfill diversion, education and empowerment. We've met and exceeded most. A couple are up at the end of 2021. Our fiscal year runs through the end of January. But there is, considerable data aggregation effort and reporting behind all of these. So behind a cotton goal, for example, there are thousands of chain of custody documentations, vendor certifications that we have to circle up and create the tools that our sourcing, merchandising, design teams can use to make decisions and how they operate. So, the complexity and the necessity of integrating it into your business operations and supply chain is huge. Also, I think the other thing we've heard here is around goal setting. You need a goal to drive progress in a large and complex organization. And it needs to be an ambitious goal. And you don't always need to know exactly how you're going to get there. I think it depends on the risk, appetite, and tolerance of the company. But for example, Williams-Sonoma put out the 100,000 workers impacted in our supply chain back in 2015. And, we had a program, Her Project, which is financial health and literacy. It's a peer-to-peer training program, amazing program with Business for Social Responsibility. But we really couldn't reach more than 60,000 workers because of the nature of the program in our supply chain. So it really created the circumstance where we thought, okay, what else can we bring to our supply chain? We landed on vision services. So partnering with a nonprofit, Vision Spring, where we did vision screening in our factories. And we found over 50% of workers needed some kind of corrective vision. And so it was this a program that we were able to impact, tens of thousands of people in our supply chain, bring other retailers along. They're on track to screen and provide vision services to 500,000 workers in global supply chains. And that arose because we put a goal out there and we were innovating to meet it and looking at the needs in our supply chain. And so really it's not knowing the answers, it's asking the right questions and listening. We came about that program because we had been working on literacy programs in factories and found that, even literacy was unattainable for certain populations because they couldn't see. Just really, innovation can happen by putting that goal out there, and you don't always know the path, especially if you're talking about a 5 to 10 year goal. So one thing I'm really proud of is some of the accolades that we've gotten as a company. I always say, internally that, because of our scale, because we're so big with our family of brands, if we make a commitment, it can really change the dynamics of the industry. And I think that's so true around wood and cotton. We're one of the largest purchasers. And so making commitments to responsible wood and to cotton really, make us top 10 in the world. And so we're really proud of this. Increasingly, our executives are out there speaking about it. But these accolades I use internally to engage people and also for our board. It's a real point of pride that helps get people on board with the sustainability agenda and keep it top of mind when they go about their day-to-day jobs. And it's also gotten external recognition. So this is a direct screenshot from a board of directors presentation that we shared. And I think the thing that I'm proud about is this quote that, in this era of everyone talking about sustainability, walking the walk is a whole other story. And I do think that our position within sourcing and supply chain gives us the leverage and the teeth to be able to walk the walk. And I'll share a little bit more about that. So a little deeper into some of the pillars. So in the people pillar, we've really been known as a company for our commitments to fair trade. We're the first to launch fair trade in home furnishings, the fair trade certified factory. We doubled our premium commitments. What's I think really fascinating about these programs is we're starting to see the impact in resilience in supply chain. So one of our largest fair trade factories in Vietnam As some of you might know, Vietnam basically went on a total shutdown until recently through COVID. He said fair trade is one of the reasons that he was able to provide continuity in income to his workers during the shutdown and retain them and get them back to the factory as they've been able to open up. So we're seeing the direct impact on supply chain resilience of some of these programs. So, fair trade, all of our worker well-being commitments, but behind those as well is also just an underlying commitment to ethical production. So, this isn't something that we're in the habit of talking about much. Increasingly, we have been sharing this information in our impact reports, but, the foundation or table stakes is your compliance program and then how you monitor that and what you do with that information. And so, just kind of want to go back to the conversation around vision services. And I mean, you can see that you're using heavy equipment in factories, right? There's quality checks in factories. So you can imagine how vision not only protects workers, health and safety in the factory, improves quality and also improves their lives outside of work. So, the kind of interchange of these quality of life inside work and outside work is not to be underestimated. So we've increasingly begun disclosing, and a lot of this, as I'll share at the end, is really driven by requests that we're getting from the outside investment world, and we know it's a strategic differentiator for our company. So we have an extensive social compliance audit program to verify health, safety, labor conditions in the factories where we produce our work, and we've driven continuous improvement in our factories. 91% of our purchase order volume is in A and B factories, significantly increased over the past 5 years through a dedicated, talented on-the-ground team. And I think the professionalization of sustainability and social impact is what we're going to be seeing over the next decade. A lot of companies, I feel fortunate to be in a dedicated department that's resourced. A lot of companies, treat it like a kind of volunteer as a committee, and that just won't drive the kind of progress that we need to see. So here are some pictures I love of some of our worker well-being programs. So when we talk about fair trade, in essence, it's a rigorous social and environmental criteria that factory have to meet. And then we pay a premium as a brand that goes directly back into a fund that the workers decide how to invest. And so they've done some amazing skill building programs. They've paid for yoga classes outside of work, computer literacy. So you're seeing pictures from across our global supply chain of our vision screening, team building activities, literacy programs. And again, putting that ambitious goal out there and driving progress to it, learning and iterating, piloting programs. That was another theme that I've heard in some of the past presentations around, how do you start lean and have a quick win? So our vision program that ended up screening over 30,000 workers started with, 3 factories in 2 countries, 632 workers, a minimal investment. And we proved the use case. We looked at the metrics, we saw the need, and then built it out from there. So it doesn't always have to be, a massive investment to be able to drive significant change. Some of the proudest work that we've done over the past couple of years is around the planet pillars. So we've had these long-standing commitments to responsible wood and cotton since 2015, and those are up at the end of this year. We've also tracked and reported on our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So that's emissions from our operations since 2011, and we've reduced them every year through efficiency, retrofits, but we've never had a goal. We've never had a public goal. And so in 2020, 2021, we undertook an extensive footprint across our entire value chain. So that's scope 1, 2, and 3. So that means everything from the raw materials to the production, to getting them to our operations, selling them, and then what happens at the end of life. And interestingly, we found that only 2% of our impact's in our operations, 98% is in our broader supply chain. And we knew that to set a credible climate target, we had to set a target across our entire value chain. So not just that 2%, but the whole supply chain. So we developed goals that were, reachable, but also a stretch. Again, a lot to be determined in how we reach these specifically still, but we have a great path, at least for the next 5 years. So we made what's called a science-based target. It's kind of industry leading, verified based on science to reduce our emissions in line with climate science. And it crosses both our scope 1 and 2, so our operations, 50% reduction. And we went for a more modest, but still very ambitious, 14% absolute reduction in our scope 3. So that's our materials, our suppliers. And the reason, we did that is we have less leverage over that. That's our entire value chain. And with our growth projected, that equates to about a 50% reduction as well. So we're just really excited about this goal. This is our new goal, our new true north that we're using to evaluate everything. But, the theme of trade-offs, you can't only look at it from a lens of carbon. And we could talk about that as well. And then we've gone beyond to say, let's do a 50% reduction in our operations and go beyond to offset through credible offsets, whatever remains to be carbon neutral in our operations by 2025. And a huge way that we're going to meet those goals is actually the materials. So about 50% of our footprint is in materials and production. We work through third-party manufacturers, so we don't own those manufacturers. So on the materials side, we're developing a preferred materials matrix. So going beyond cotton and wood, thinking across material types, how do we move towards more innovative, preferred materials? This is a snapshot of a material innovation database that our team has created, because for Williams-Sonoma, we can't we have to make sure that it's a durable product, that it's commercially viable, that it's cost, that it's available to our supply chains. There are a lot of kind of considerations where a new innovative material might not have applicability in a complex supply chain. But it's going to be a huge lever of how we reach our targets. We're also going to be partnering across our vendor base to have them create their own targets and invest in renewable energy. And a lot of that roadmap is similar to what we're doing in our operations. So in our operations, our roadmap to carbon neutral is efficiency. So more efficient appliances, light bulbs, HVAC, I know came up before, investing in renewables like solar, green power, power purchase agreements, and then offsetting whatever we can't reduce. But, really it's around efficiency and reduction. And we influence this, but we don't own it. We partner across the supply chain. And a lot of what we do is bring together all the different parts of the organization that would operate in silos. So we have a facilities team, we have a supply chain facilities team. We bring them together to be able to do an RFP and select one enterprise-wide solar provider so that we get the best economies of scale that the company can offer. And lastly, but probably one of my favorite topics, is waste and circularity. It also is probably one of the most complex topics. And just to speak about kind of silos and challenges, I would say there's probably no fewer than 14 teams that touch packaging across our company. So we're a big convener. When you think about packaging and something like reducing plastic in packaging or foam in packaging, increasing curbside recyclable, there are tons of considerations. One is, the performative aspects of packaging. I've already said 50% of our impact is in raw materials and production. So one of the, harshest environmental things that we could do is have products damaged en route to our customers and then, not be able to sell them, right? So you need those protective elements, but then you also need to be able to transition. So we have brand packaging, we have vendor packaging, we have procurement teams, bringing them together to transition to recyclable alternatives and reduce, increasing in-house recycling, ensuring that, product doesn't end up in waste streams, and that we expand our donation program. So we've had some amazing success. We had a 260% increase in year-over-year product donations through great partnerships like those with Habitat for Humanity. And they've been able to leverage those, resell them in their restores to then generate, income to build around 150 homes. So there, is a lot of treasure in waste streams. And then really all those come together as kind of our purpose pillar. So, I shared quickly our 2020, 2021 goals. We've been in the process over the past couple of years of looking at data, looking outside at the market, looking at our business, talking to all of our brands, and coming up with goals for the next 2025, 2030, 5 to 10 years. our science-based target and carbon neutral goals, an example of that. We've been slowly launching those. We just announced a new goal around fair trade, as well as our commitment to Nest ethically handcrafted product. But this is really what brings it all together and to life. We actually have an umbrella goal. So, one thing is just having clear messages that people can remember and repeat. And ultimately, it's embedding it in your business. So across Williams-Sonoma, across our brands, 40% of our products represent one or more of our social or environmental initiatives today. We're going to raise that. We just, excuse me, set a goal to have that be 75% by 2030. And that's, walking the walk. It's $1 billion in product purchases a year. And that's really the impact that we can have through our business and offering our customers that widest assortment of social and environmental products. It matters to them. So our customers, we're able to partner with our marketing team. Our customers are 40% more likely to prioritize social and environmental considerations than the average customer. Pottery Barn customers are 3 times more likely to be in the top environmentally minded households, and 70% of our customers, below the age of 35, say it is a significant factor. So we just see it growing. These are stats, again, I've used internally. This is what helps get all those internal teams on board as well to drive towards progress. And our brands are uniquely positioned to be able to tell the story. So here are some of the campaigns. My team really partners heavily with our brand marketing teams to make sure that we're telling authentic, genuine, that we have the checks and balances, but that really we're celebrating these stories, and more to come for sure around here. And we partner across the industry. So here are some of the nonprofits, industry associations that we partner with. I heard that as another theme. Don't do it alone in the sustainability space. And when thinking about jobs, like amazing jobs, I hear Textile Exchange is hiring, I think, 60 new positions next year. They have a fantastic new leader. So like tons of opportunity in these nonprofit and industry associations also to really make an impact. And then this is a ton of information. So I'll just explain what it is, but there's increasing scrutiny around this from the investment community, and any kind of public company is really eyes open about it. So this is what we call kind of, our ESG ratings or strategies. We get rated as a company on our programs. And a lot of that is how well you disclose them, what you disclose. So you have kind of the ratings agencies on the right, also, hiring and looking for MBA talent. Frameworks on the bottom. We've talked about the SDGs here, but a couple of the other frameworks, and then standards on the left that are reporting standards that companies are reporting to. So kind of by being strategic, enhancing the way that we communicate, driving that change, but making it meaningful to our business, we've been able to raise our ratings, which gets the attention of the board and the CEO, and then removes barriers for my team as well. So that is a little bit about some of our programs, and would love to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was really terrific, and merging the purpose and the passion and the aspiration with the business case and the business benefit, and especially the board and the investor support and all of that. It was just the integration of all those things was really terrific. Let's take a couple of, we have about 5 minutes left because hard stop on the hour. But any questions from our attendees that you would like to ask Jennifer? Please use chat.
So I'd say while I'm waiting for questions to come in, I'd say another thing that I kind of heard from the panelists in terms of job advice is be specific. And I couldn't agree more. Like, I didn't come into this role thinking, oh, this is what I want to do. I came in because I was so passionate about artisan production and helping connect artisans to global supply chains. And then as I sort of peeled back the layers, I found so many interesting things to work on. And no one, I've been writing and rewriting my own job for 8 years. So, find a company that is great, follow your passion, think about what industry you're interested in, what pieces of the, supply chain that you might be. Supply chain is a great place to have a tremendous impact. Data, bone up your data skills. I think so much of our work is data driven, using data, reporting, data visualization to be able to drive change. What kind of pilots for recycling are you going to do? So we launched battery and light bulb recycling across all of our stores. We're in the process of hauling back EPS foam because EPS is recyclable. It's just not recyclable in a lot of municipalities. And we're also just launching with Fab Scrap to do textile recycling. One of the projects I'm most proud of is Pottery Barn Renewed. You saw on the screen there, it launched in about a year ago. So it took kind of lightly damaged, seconds from our supply chain. We worked with a great partner, the Renewal Workshop, who repaired, cleaned, and we resold to customers. The other project that I'm really proud of is a partnership you might not read a lot about publicly, but within sustainability, it's like find your advocates and find the pain points. So, I'm a huge advocate of resale, and I think there's tremendous potential there. And I think that's a huge growing avenue around resale that, will be continuing to grow and have a lot of job opportunity. And so we found the pain point in our stores that had returns that were bulky or their floor sets needed to be changed out. We partnered with a platform that's in the East Coast and now just expanded to California called AppDeco. It's a resale platform. So our stores post the product. Customers actually think it's used. They may not know it's coming from our store. And when it sells, AppDeco picks it up and delivers it to a customer. So it offers them a way to, get seconds or damages off the store floor and not take up that store selling. But it also gives us intelligence on what category, sell through, margin for a secondary marketplace.
Okay, maybe we could wrap up with this question, and it links a couple of them, Jennifer. One is, how do you see or navigate the tension between investing in a project that's more sustainable, but maybe not immediate financial returns? Or how do you navigate that question of finance versus sustainable, and how do you engage that?
Yeah, well, I think that it's a great question because, I think you need to go to the top. You need the board advocating and the CEO, because often a lot of these projects will be an expense in one P&L, but it'll be a savings in the other, or it'll affect our customer experience, right? And so you need to reach the people who are making enterprise-wide brand level decisions, not scrutinizing in individual P&Ls. I also think, tackle cost savings first. Try to, do the positive ROI projects, and then, you build your credibility, you get some quick wins. Media impressions matter. Employee engagement matters. So think about what other non-financial metrics you may be able to capture and build and tell the story about. Even those marketing metrics that, I showed you, it's not just bottom line. And I think, good strategic leaders understand that.
And you mentioned ESG, and you talked about investors focus. Yeah. Do you see that as a lever here, or how do you see investor relations factoring in? Huge and key partner of ours. We, also the SEC, is speaking about kind of incorporating more ESG metrics in mandatory, to be mandatory in filing. So I think a lot of companies are really looking at this carefully. Boards of directors are asking about it. And the ratings, by taking on the ESG ratings, I've seen how being able to improve our ratings by better disclosure also helps us get the momentum for goals that we want to set. So when the investors are asking, everyone listens. So I'm a huge advocate of kind of that increased, just awareness and attention from the investment community as well. Thank you so very much. So we're at the hour. Maybe if I could just hit you up with one simple question, advice for our students. Maybe it's not simple. But.
Yeah, great. I think, follow your passion, find a company that you love. You can create your own job. The most interesting jobs aren't the ones that are even listed, right? And so, this field is changing so quickly. Be a problem solver, approach it with passion. Don't do anything as a bridge to something else. Do it now. And, integrate it into everything that you do. I mean, every day I talk to someone in a different function across this company who has an integral role in, making sustainability come to life. So you can do this work from any function across a company. So really, be creative, think about that, and be a problem solver.
Thank you so very much, Jennifer. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to all of you who have participated in this symposium. It is our intention to make these videos available so that your message and really what you've shared and taught will be more broadly available, and we really appreciate that. And it is closing in on the dinner hour for you, Jennifer, so we really appreciate that sacrifice too. Thank you, everyone. This has been an absolutely powerful and wonderful afternoon. We've all been inspired by what we've learned, and really the path that we're all on and that we need to continue to work together to accomplish. So I would just like to thank all of you. Sheree is ending with our final QR code. And thank you very much. And please pay attention to Loyola Marymount University's Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability. This is one of a number of programs that we highlight and that we advance to really help reinforce business as a force for good. Thank you so very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and afternoon.